going to call this meeting to order. In accordance with the open meeting law, the board states for the record that this meeting is being recorded by NORCAM and may be recorded by other local media. The meeting is being recorded by the town via Zoom. If you could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Right. Okay, our first order of business, and we're joined by Select Board Member Mr. Studo virtually. Forgot to say that. So we're all roll call vote this evening. Our first order of business is the wastewater sewer project. Votes may be taken. Yeah, we have a we're joined by our director, and we have a presentation.
So, Madam Chair?
Do you need a copy for yourself? No? Oh, excuse me.
Yeah.
Mr. O'Leary.
Just for the record, that I would like to state that, I filed all the necessary disclosures in relation to any concerns that anybody may have. Also had advice of counsel in relation to any positions that I may be taking. The public is well aware, as I've stated in public sessions, that I have a family member and my brother owns property on, or just off of, or on Route 28, maybe along the proposed route. There are certain exemptions that allow certain municipal employees, of which we are municipal employees, to participate in such discussions. And I believe the exemptions based upon the advice of counsel do apply, so that I will be participating in the deliberations of the board and offering my opinions along the way. At some risk, I suppose.
Okay,
But
thank
all
you.
necessary disclosures have been filed.
Thank you, Mr. O'Leary.
And
Mr. Wallner?
I'm in the exact same position, except it's not his brother, it's my wife, but she owns an office condo at Park Place condominiums, and so duplicate paths, but I've also been advised that I'm fine to deliberate, so for the record.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wallner. And Mr. Parisi, Mr. Gilberto, any opening remarks, or do you want Mr. Parisi to take it away?
I'll give a very brief opening.
Sure.
I'll give some very brief opening remarks. As I stated at the last meeting, we have been having a significant amount of discussion both with Town Council and with the Department of Revenue with regard to the issue of how we might be able to structure the so-called connection fee setup for folks who are looking to connect to the sewer at some point in the future. And so what you're going to see is the result of multiple conversations and multiple back and forths with those folks to reflect a potential scenario. You'll see it does not include any recommendation with regard to betterment in accordance with the Select Board's previous vote on the project. You'll also see that where we had some discussion with regard to the concept of privilege fees, the Department of Revenue has taken the strong stance that privilege fees cannot be assessed unless betterments are assessed. So that effectively takes privilege fees off of the table. However, we have honed in on a concept that would be technically classified as a user fee from our conversations with Town Council, but I'm not going to call it that because I think we all start to think about the monthly or quarterly costs folks would pay for using the sewer. So I'm going to use language that we've actually utilized for our water system, which is a system development fee. So those who are involved in construction in town, if they've developed or built a new house and tried to connect it to our water department, they are assessed a system development fee. This is the exact same model, although there are different financing scenarios for this. It is not a betterment. It's not financed by the town. It's something that would need to be paid upon a property deciding that it wants to connect. So there's no assessment that's made once the project is completed. It's all triggered by the private property owner stepping forward and saying, I would like to connect to the sewer system. That triggers the assessment of a cost based upon a rate that needs to be determined. So Mr. Parisi has put together some information he's going to review, including, I think, quickly going through the comparison of betterment, privilege fee, user fee, but I think we can get through that pretty quickly and then really get to financing scenarios that we put together.
May I just say, we Mr. O'Leary, you weren't here, but we eliminated betterment. So
Correct.
I I'd rather have us not even spend any amount of time on it, because it's already just, we should just streamline it to, especially if we're gonna be taking a vote here. We don't need comparisons if we're not doing a betterment. We already took that off the table. So I don't know why we would even talk about it this evening. If we could just keep to the, and I understand what you're saying, we didn't know this until now. To do the privilege fee, which is attaching to the system, you have to do the betterment fee too. Well, we're not calling it that. So can't we just zone in on the development fee? Because that makes the most sense. And why are we talking betterments? We should just stop talking about that. We just gotta streamline it to
I think
be.
I may, in my description, have covered what you were gonna describe in the chart, so
I
we
think
probably
it's
can go
fine.
right to it.
Yeah,
It's in the
let's,
chart, I mean, you can review it
Right.
one time, so, that's fine.
if that's okay. I mean,
Sure.
let's just focus in on what we need to focus in on, because we really do need to, the board needs to make some action now so that we can get this rolling out for more public information sessions. Just 1 second, Mr. Parisi, because you're gonna try to put it
Yeah.
everywhere, so we can, those of us with limited vision can see.
That's why I sit here, because I put the.
It's a front row seat.
What is it,
40%.
Mrs. Gonzalez?
I was gonna see if you could hit the lights.
Sir, do you think you could just shut the lights? Thank you. That's better. All right.
Ready to go?
I think so.
So, the first chart here, what we're looking at is, two determinations of, debt exclusion based on the amount of project cost borrowing to be, done in scenario one, which represents the cost of the project at $129,100,000. Some available funding from, state and federal earmarks that can, reduce the amount that we would have to borrow for the project by $1,750,000. So really, another opportunity, another funding source is SRF funding, clean water funding. So that's $112,600,000 available in low interest, 2.4%, leaving a balance of $14,750,000 that would be market rate borrowing costs. So putting that in our projections, Hilltop Securities had come up with the cost over the 30-year period. The average cost of that is that number shown, $6,359,189. So looking at the average impact, or the impact of the average single-family home, valued at $745,319. That is at a cost per $1,000 in value of $1.50. For a cost at $1,000 per value, that's $1,116 per year over the 30-year period. So that is a scenario where we are really only looking at state and federal earmarks to bring down the cost of the project to be borrowed.
Mr.
So-
Parisi, can I just interrupt you on this?
You can.
Thank you. So there's a lot of talk about this too. So you have the measuring stick there. Single family home worth a value of $745. That 1116 figure is based on that, right? That's your measuring stick. If your home is worth higher than that, the assessment is also obviously calculated higher than that. If your home is worth lower than that assessed value, it's lower than that. But you're using that as the basically the benchmark or the watermark for
That
us.
is correct, yes.
So it's not going to be 1116 for everybody. That's
No,
the,
it will not.
yeah, but that's really, we have to have some
That's
figure there.
that's a average single-family valued
Value
home, so
here.
that's a base mark.
Yes.
And, just look at your tax bill, your assessed value on that bill, and you can determine, pretty much what that would be what your cost impacts would be based on those two numbers, $1.50 per thousand, or for $100,000 valuation, you have $1,116, that's correct.
Thank you, Mr. Parisi.
So looking at another scenario where, we have some availability of funds from the sale of land, or otherwise known as Pulte funds, we could, as before in scenario one, reduce the amount to be borrowed by the $1,750,000 earmarks. We're going to borrow at a low interest rate of 2.4% for the Clean Water Trust. And if we were to bring in Pulte funds on sale of land in the amount of $14,750, we can avoid the market rates. I think we had projected 5% on $14.75 million. So that would reduce the average annual borrowing cost to $5,448,681. So it does reduce the impacts, to the single-family home, or all homes basically. But you can see the numbers now: $1.28 and $956. So it's a reduction of $160 by bringing in the other available funds from the sale of land. So any questions on those two scenarios?
Any questions? All set to my colleagues, Mr. O'Leary?
You just want a question or you want a comment?
Either one.
Why would we use almost $15 million in our savings account when we can borrow at 2.5%?
Well, this is eliminating the 5% borrowing. Because there's qualified.
I understand,
project costs
I
and
understand,
unqualified,
I
yeah.
understand, but still over a 30-year time period, it's, anyway, I'll save it for later. Okay,
Okay.
I understand.
Mr. Gilberto, if Mr. Studo has a question, can you just, I can't really see from joining. I know he doesn't have his hand up, but are you all set, Mr. Wallner?
I'm
Mrs.
okay.
Gonzalez?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
I see Mr. Studo there, I don't see his hand up, so let's move
Okay,
on.
thank you.
You good, Joe?
We good, Mr.
Well, it is.
Parisi.
There you go. Mike has the controls.
Oh,
I'm the entry today.
all right.
All right, so I will begin. So what we're, next step, what we're trying to do is bring in some samples or a range of potential revenues that can be collected through the system development fees. So we have a project cost that you see there at $129,100,000. And so the sample ranges are on this particular chart from 5% to 50%. And so they will give you a range of potential costs that would be recovered through fees. And you can see that in the third line down. And we do have a certain number of what's called, sewer units or bedroom sewer units. And you can see that number there, 3,983. So basically doing the math, taking the six on the first column at 5%, 6,455,000 divided by 3,983 gives you a number of 1,621 as being the system development fee for, per bedroom. Per bedroom. So if you have a 3-bedroom home, then it would be 3 times that amount. And the same would hold true across the board there. If you slide over to the 50% range, it'll be 3 times that amount of 16,206. So So it's a matter of determining perhaps, what percentage you want to, recapture through fees.
So, I have a question, Mr. Parisi. Well, we talked about this and we were waiting for DOR on, you might have another slide on this actually. So this would be just trying to determine right now what percentage of fee that, to affix for the development fee. When we-
Correct. We're trying to hone in on, the cost, the full cost, if you will. We could talk about, doing some modifications over time. But the full cost of the project that you want to capture through fees. And we're trying to uniformly assess that to everybody that's going to connect.
So
And
this isn't like what Mr. Wallner was saying over the course of time. So let's say someone does, joins the system immediately versus someone who says, I'll put it off because I just got a new septic for another 20 years. That isn't incrementally increased, in other words.
Not on this particular slide. You'll see some increases in another slide.
Okay. This is just trying to give us some samples of,
The sample ranges of percentage of
percent.
project cost to be assessed,
okay.
to be collected. All right, so I think we're ready. If there's no other questions, to move to the next slide.
Any other questions?
I
Mr.
just want to
Wallner?
get some clarification.
Sure.
So can you just, so we can read the words on the left side there, just move it over to
Mike, can you just slide that over to the...
So I just want to make sure, I understand the total, line one is very clear, that's the total cost of the project. Just want to make sure I understand this. And what you're saying is that the total cost, like in the first example, if you wanted to capture 5%, there's 3,983 bedrooms
Correct.
that would be on the route. So the condos have 2 bedrooms, various things like that, right?
That is correct. You would add up every bedroom in all condo complexes, all single-family homes, but you would also add to that all of the equivalent bedrooms in a commercial property. So if that commercial
Say that
property...
again, say that again, last time you just said about commercial property?
Right, so the total bedroom count is either a real bedroom that we all know
Yeah.
in a residential home, or a bedroom equivalency based on Title V flow, which is 110 gallons per day.
So, but minimal for most of the businesses, because most of the businesses don't use water.
Title V requires a design of septic system capacity based on, the type of property you have. Like a restaurant would be a higher requirement
Other than restaurants.
than a retail space, but there's still a requirement for, square footage of retail. So when you have a certain building size, it's gonna look at that and apply, some factor to it to require flow.
Okay, so it's
And-
equitable.
And you'll have the same for other types of, and when there's no, I think, specific mention of a type of commercial space, they talk about a multiplier on the actual water used. So there is a Title V that can be determined, and we did that as a trial run for, when Kleinfeld put those numbers together in the original spreadsheets.
Okay.
So now we're taking those numbers and we're dividing by 110 gallons per day. We're coming up with an equivalent bedroom count, and those get added to the actual bedrooms in the residential class as well.
Okay.
So the total equals 3,983.
Okay, gotcha, thank you. I understand it now.
Yep.
Mrs. Hurlbut.
Yes, through you to Mr. Parisi. So when you say portion of full project cost to be recovered by system development fees, you're assuming that everybody can't wait to buy into this club, is that correct? Because in fact, if it's up to the individual homeowner or up to the condo association, whether or not they decide to attach to the system, is an unknown.
Right, we're not saying that this is how much you will collect. What we're saying is your fee is going to be based on this percentage that you want to collect.
No, I got the percentage
Okay.
business, but line 3 says portion of full project cost to be recovered by system development fees.
Right, so the portion of the full project cost being 129,100, the portion being that percentage, being applied to that number, giving you, the amount that you're gonna use to determine the fee.
That assumes, however, that all of those 3,983 bedrooms or whatever decide to hook up to the sewer, is that correct?
No, so you're required to uniformly assess the amount that you want to connect to the full abutters of the property. It's a uniform assessment. So if you were to say, well, you should assume only 50% is going to connect and divide $6,455,000 by 50% of 3,983, you're going to get a much higher number. We're not trying to collect all of that. We're saying we are going to have a uniform assessment. Everybody pays based on the total number of sewer units, an amount. If we collect all of that, great, we will hit that number, but we don't believe it's all going to be 100% connected, no.
Because it is up to the individual homeowner or the condo
Correct.
association whether or not to hook up to the sewer system.
That's correct, right.
Okay.
All we're saying
So
is,
that's like best case scenario, if everybody hooked up and the rate was 5%, then that's what you would end up with.
right,
Thank you.
yep.
But it's basically an unknown number.
No, we understand that, but I mean, this is the uniform assessment.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yep.
I just wanted to make sure that I hadn't missed something. that
You did
there
not
wasn't
miss anything.
6 million floating around in the skies that I was unaware of.
So, Madam Chair, if I might just,
Mr. O'Leary?
and maybe Joe, you could help clarify this a
Mr.
little bit.
O'Leary.
Really what this chart is doing is helping guide the board to determine what's the new fee gonna be called?
The system development.
No, okay, what the system development fee would be based on bedroom equivalency,
Correct.
correct? So this is a guide for the board to say, what do you think is a reasonable cost per bedroom to tie in to the system? It's not, and again, the amount of money that's gonna be collected through these fees is not significant. If you think back about when we first were proposing the project for public input, the most we were gonna collect through betterments was just over 50%. The rest of it was gonna be absorbed through the general. That was at a $35,000 fee per unit. So this is just a different way that the board has to come to a conclusion as to what do we think is a reasonable cost for a bedroom equivalency count, and where do we wanna be? Do we wanna be at, 5,000, 10,000 per bedroom, 20,000 per bedroom, whatever it's gonna be, or 1,000 per bedroom, 500 per bedroom. And this is just how the calculation is made based upon the current cost of the project and a percentage of it going towards these tie-in fees. So don't get hung up, and there's no way we're ever gonna get 100% maxed out in a short period of time, or if ever. So it's just a question of, what do we think, the board would think is going to be a reasonable fee to charge per bedroom equivalency, and that will land at some percentage of the project cost. So don't get hung up on how much we're really gonna collect, because it really isn't going to make a significant difference as far as the collectability and what we're gonna get for savings on a tax rate in the short term, at all.
But I think it's important though, because I think when we first looked at this before we had the input on it, it was 10, 20, 30. We were looking at an opt-in fee, so to speak. But this is more precise, like Mr. Parisi's instructing us, it has to be based, take the total number of those bedroom units, dividing it by the percentage, and then we have to figure out on this kind of mapping what range we think is reasonable for that.
Vincenzo's got his hand up. Mr.
Oh.
Studo has his hand up.
But I wanted to make sure, or make it clear, that was not a definite number, because we have no way of knowing, and no one's going to be forced apparently to tie in. So that's a big question mark. Maybe a lot of people will, maybe they won't.
No, I know, but it's
That's
not,
my
he's
point.
not putting this up to say that 100% of the people are tying in. He's trying to give us the
I
uniform.
understand what he's trying to say.
Yeah, right. But we're not all sitting here expecting that, we know
That's
people aren't
good.
gonna tie in. We've heard from the meetings that people aren't gonna tie in, and we've heard from other meetings who will, so, all right.
Mr.
somebody-
Studo has his hand up.
Mr. Studo.
Hi. So the other thing I want to point out, and this is, we need this for the board to come up with a balance to also incentivize, correct? It's the what is in it for me? So let's not forget that, and again, I can't see all, but I'll just look at the first two. Based on, we start going down, I mean, it gets very expensive, but based on some of the columns here, like especially, just how we look at it per bedroom, let's not forget that the replacement and repair of a septic is, let's see, 25 times more than that first column, the per bedroom. And again, I'm not saying that, but I think we got that estimate. I don't have that slide in front of me. So it's an incentive. And then also I believe we did get an estimate after that it is, and again, this is even harder, but it's between $2,000 and $6,000 to decommission a sewer. That was another question. But that's what I think we have to weigh. And these are today's costs, right? So I think we do have to keep that in mind that, again, if there's still people, let's say by some chance this goes through, if in 10 years somebody would rather pay $30,000 to $40,000 to replace their septic rather than tie in at the per residential bedroom, let's say you had a 3-bedroom and we choose, I'm just gonna pick on slide 3. I'm not saying we're doing that. And let's say it was like, all right, it's gonna cost you $15,000 to tie in, it's gonna cost you, let's go to the high end, $6,000 to decommission, and then it's gonna cost you another $5,000 to run the pipes to the street. And again, I'm trying to use the top end of every estimate. If at that point somebody's still like, no, I'd rather pay 15 and then still have septic, I mean, there's nothing we can do with that. But I feel like that's what the board needs to do, is look at these numbers and incentivize to the point where, even in life, I've done things where I was totally against, and then when the time came to make a decision and the numbers just did not back my way of thinking, I had to make the decision of whether I wanted to pay more for my high horse or to just look at the numbers. So I think this will help the board, and again, the board is just trying to put in options, but, I think that replacement, that sewer, that septic replacement slide, I think needs to be very handy, because that is the alternative. Like, no one can escape that. There's the one-off stories of people that have had a septic for 60 years that were built X, but the newer systems aren't made for that. And what I mean newer, my understanding is the ones from the 70s and 80s. So, and then when it comes to condos, again, they need to make their own determination, but those big treatment plants, I mean, those are not cheap, and they're gonna get more expensive, and, again, it's like, you can believe it or not, but we live in a state where there's a new environmental rule passed almost every other week, and, everything is gonna become more expensive. So, again, just to keep an open mind, that the board needs these numbers, right? There's no guarantee, right, that people will tie in. However, I can make a reasonable bet that if I owned a house on Park Street in 10 years, and there was a difference between all-in 20 to tie in or 40, if I choose the 40, then I need somebody to, really take me to my local financial advisor's office, because it wouldn't make sense. So that's what I'm just saying. If you compare, and again, they're all what-ifs, right? They're projections, which is the hard thing about, I've noticed, planning something like this. But again, I feel like, let's just keep that open mind that, the alternative is not, I feel like we keep not talking about the alternative. And I feel like it's purposely being ignored because it really cuts a lot of arguments. Because no one wants to say that it could cost you up to $40,000 to replace the septic, because no one wants to say that. But we got those estimates, those 30 to 40 for a new septic from local contractors. This is not something that the town just thought up in a closet. So I just want everyone to keep that aware. And actually, before the end of the presentation, Mr. Gilberto, Mr. Parisi, if you can find that slide and post it up, I really think, I think a refresher is needed.
All right, thank you, Mr. Suda. I don't think Mr. Parisi's finished though, so we're gonna keep moving, we're gonna keep along. Because I think you have a couple more slides for us.
I do.
guys. Thank you.
Next. I'm not sure if you can relocate here.
Move Vincenzo.
Can you bring that up? Oh, all right, so here is a chart that really talks about discounting the amount that was shown on the previous slide. So you can see that at the very bottom yellow line, there's a 30-plus assessment. That is the full cost that you saw in the previous slides. And so we're looking at a starting point from years 1 through 5 that is less. And it would increase every 5 years, get into a new category of costs. It adds the same amount each year until you get to the final 30-plus years. And in essence, what that is doing is it's raising half of what you would hope to collect in the prior slide. So if you said, you know, you're going to collect 50,000 or 50%, you're actually on the very far right. You're going to collect only 25% of that.
It's an escalation.
But we're allowed to
It's the
discount,
escalation.
yeah, so what you have to do is you have to set the high end of the fee. And you can't change that or increase that because that's set with a uniform formula. So that everybody pays the same and that doesn't change. But if you wanted to discount that for the early years, you can. Is that understood? No,
Yes.
this is a
Yes.
situation where you have to set a price, you have to maintain that price. If you want to allow discount, you can do that. And you can gradually get back to that fee that you set.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. Well, we're not doing dialogue, but if you had a
Okay.
specific
No,
question,
just a
one
question,
question,
yeah.
we'll allow it.
Yeah, I just have,
One question on it?
well, there's actually, it's one question, but there's two things. I just want clarification on the reference. I can't see it though, so I mean, I'm taking what everyone's saying, trying to keep my head. I just wanted to say, when Mr. Priest, when you said you can discount it, so you can do something like, say, for the first 2 years, there's gonna be a discounted amount, and the third year, you're gonna go up pretty high if you don't go to it, so offer some incentive. So it's like a carrot rather than a stick, right? So you can do something like that?
You can do that. You can set the full fee, that's going to remain the same, but if you want to offer an incentive in the early years, you can discount
Yeah,
that.
see how things are going, see if people happy with whatever. The other question I have is just a reference. Is this information, just, are you trying to recapture all the money from the former abutters? Because the other part of town, they're not getting it. So is this all on the shoulders of the abutters?
These fees?
Yeah, the whole thing.
Yeah, a system development fee, you may be familiar with that in the water department, but a system development fee is when a new user wants to connect to the system, it does pay a fee to get in, an entrance fee, if you will. And then there is the regular user fees based on the amount of water they use. But with each new connection, there is a system development fee.
But when you come up with a uniform code, I'm assuming that when you have so many people who live along the streets, they're the only ones getting the pipe. And so you're not taking into account there's 50,000 other residents who are not being asked to to contribute to this?
They are, all the residents are asked to contribute to the project by a debt exclusion for the project cost.
And so, have we talked about that?
We have, that was slide,
Is that the
one of the-
1,116?
that's correct.
Okay.
Okay, so we're gonna move on, but
Okay.
this is
Thank
not
you.
this is a connection
Yeah.
fee, and it's not gonna be the person that's benefiting from the connection, that by
Right.
connecting to the system, the user,
Yeah.
that's what this slide represents.
Just trying
And
to-
I
So
should have
it
made that
isn't
clear.
passing the project cost along on the whole town, because the whole town can't connect, right?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I just
So,
wanna
but
make
this
sure
slide
that,
has to do with when a person along, or a parcel along the route wants to join. We're trying to figure out the
understand.
connection. It's a connection fee, which is, you're calling a development user fee, I think, right, Ms. Parisi?
That's correct.
All right,
That's correct.
okay.
All right, so there's a little bit more data there, so I don't know if you can zoom back in, just to go further, but on the bottom. So similar information, so you have, the same number of sewer bedroom count, you have an amount that, as I said before, about 50%, it is 50% of what the full cost of the project or development fee would be if it was kept the same over the whole 30-year period. So you have an average now of $141,284 that would come in if there were equal connections over the 30-year period. And that's the low range, and then the high range will give you,
Can we see that on the other side, Mr.
Yeah.
Gilberto, just to see the difference, I think? So at the 5% versus 50%.
right, you can see where the high range now would yield $1,412 a year for the 30-year period, raising $42,385,000.
Madam Chair, through you,
No, Mr. Gilberto.
just to clarify, so that is if the connections all occurred in even distribution over a 30-year period.
Correct.
So that number, 1,412,000, if you were in the last 50% column, that's an average. The first years it's going to be lower, the later years it's going to be higher.
Well, because you have the discount.
Correct.
That is correct. I should-
And again, those are only, it's a projection,
Yeah.
it's not guaranteed revenue, but that's what it would look like.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, so we can get to the next slide.
Okay.
All right, so this is a comparison, if you can just.
It's just taking a minute to load. Okay.
All right, so we're doing a comparison based on the actual bedroom counts that we may encounter on the in connections. So we do have shown here residential 1 bedroom, and 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, 4, 5. We show some condominium complexes as well as samples and some commercial properties. So we have, the 1 to 5 year discounted, and the 30 plus or the full amount discounted. So if we focus on the residential 3 bedroom, you can see what the impacts are across the board from 5% to 50%. So you can see down at the 50% range, we're talking about $20,000 in the first year of connection for the 3 bedroom. single family or condominium. And if they were to wait till 30-plus years, it would be at $48,619. Any question on how this works?
Questions?
Joe, I just have a
Mr.
question, Madam
O'Leary?
Chair. Just a question, I understand this is an example, but can the discount slide? In other words, depending upon what the economy is 12 years from now, you know, if we embrace this chart and the board at the time decides, you know what, the economy is such that we want to keep the discount here and encourage more people to tie in, what flexibility does the board have to continue a discount at a different rate?
I believe that
So,
you
so
would
long as
have-
it's below the maximum rate that can be charged and then established.
Right, as long as you don't exceed what was established as the maximum rate, I believe you can probably alter the discount. Any select board in the future could alter the discount that was
But
selected.
they wouldn't be able to exceed,
Not exceed it,
good,
but alter
okay.
the discount more or less.
So again, they'd be able to be flexible in relation to whatever the economy or the demand is calling for.
Correct. If you feel that, there's a lot of connections going on very quickly and, capacity is getting low, you may want to increase, the connection fee or the system development fee to moderate that a little bit so they don't round too quickly or whatever. Or if it's not happening soon enough, lower the fees. Supply and demand, I guess,
Right,
is
okay.
what we're talking about.
Mr. O'Leary, you all set?
All set, thank you.
Mrs. Gonzalez?
Could you just explain these numbers to me?
Explain the description on each one of those.
Yeah, what are those numbers representing? The 282, is that how many of those there are?
Oh, yes, so condominium complex A, having 282 bedrooms total. Right, so there may be 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, or 3 bedrooms
Oh,
within
in
the
the
complex.
entire complex?
But the entire complex has 282. So if a condominium association wants to connect, they would be issued a sewer permit to the association. It's not individually issued to owners. And then the condominium association would pay the fee at the point that they're applying for the permit.
So you calculated that out as though, let's say there was, 10 one-bedroom,
Right, I
100
got the total-
two-bedrooms.
That's correct, got the total amount of bedrooms, looking at each
182
individual
three-bedrooms,
condominium.
it's just even across the board, like each unit's one bedroom, so that's how you come up with the
We
figure.
looked at the assessor's records where they keep track of, the bedroom count for each unit.
Okay.
And then restaurant, I'm sorry.
Right, so we, again, we made a calculation based on Title V requirements, so like a seat.
Oh,
Yeah, if you can accommodate X amount of people in your restaurant, Title V says per seat times X amount of gallons per day. So that will give you, so if you have a very large restaurant,
yeah.
you would have to construct a very significant septic system to accommodate
Right.
the number of customers that you would be able to hold in your restaurant.
Hey, Mrs. Gonzalez?
Okay.
But, Mr. Parisi, something you just said I have a question on. Because when we did the agreement with Andover and we were expecting to, do the sewer or, engage in making the sewer happen. And we did all this permitting for a specific number of is it gallons per day?
Yes.
But you just said, if there's too many and it's too much, but didn't we already hear from you in one of the informational hearings about, let's say, the projection with, let's just say, everybody in this route joins, but that there was I guess,
There's a buffer for
an
growth.
accessing capacity, thank you, Mrs. Hurlbut. Not a buffer, but to accommodate, let's say, a single family wants to turn into a 5-bedroom home, there was excess capacity
That is correct.
already built into this. So why would we be, making the fee higher, if people wanted to join sooner? That doesn't make sense to me, so I just wanted to understand what you're talking about, because we're putting this in with the expectation or the hope that everybody can connect to it for the benefit that it creates. So why would we be then saying, oh, we have to put the fee higher so we slow down the connection? That makes no sense to me.
Well, it's just supply and demand, I guess, would say that if you're running out of capacity, you could probably or should probably charge more to maybe start capturing some of the costs that you discounted earlier on.
All right, I'm not getting why we would run out of capacity. I don't understand that.
So we have a limited 500,000 gallons per day capacity. And that would accommodate everybody in this phase and some smaller sections of town as well, off of Main Street, like Martin's Pond area, and some growth within those areas. So if this project area were to sort of fully connect and a lot of growth happens, there could be certainly some point where you're running out of capacity. It's not an unlimited sewer system design. So you only have so much to sell. You can make decisions in the future if you want to try to get more for that remaining capacity that you do have, so that you can maybe accommodate, or not accommodate, but maybe achieve a little bit more cost recovery than if you were just to stay on the same schedule. Because the point was made, or the question was asked, can you modify this going forward? Yes, you can.
You can. We're not locked into it.
Yeah, you can't go beyond the maximum, but you could change the discounts over time. If a select board in the future says, you know, we're discounting it too much, let's raise it, or if they say, you know, even with these discounts, they're not connecting, let's go lower, and sacrifice, our connections percentage, So that's what all I'm saying. I'm just saying that, yes, you can modify it in the future as long as you don't go over the maximum amount set.
Okay. Mrs. Hurlbut?
Through you to Mr. Parisi, my understanding when these numbers first came up, not these numbers, but the capacity of the system, was that it would be adequate capacity to do existing structures on 2862 and Lone Road. That we had about 50% additional capacity to take into consideration expansion of existing properties or new construction along one of the sewer routes. And that in addition, we had set aside some capacity in the event that Martin's Brook decides to go along with the gate. Is that not correct?
Yeah, that sounds correct.
I'm sorry?
That is correct.
All right, so actually, while it is not a system that's open-ended and you can just put as much stuff through the pipes as you wish, there is plenty of capacity, so that I don't think we should be worried about it right now. Is that correct?
It'll probably be a while before you'll have any concerns about reaching capacity. That's correct.
And what do you do when you reach capacity?
You would no longer allow connections or additional growth.
Thank you.
Or you can maybe make some adjustments to pumps and motors in your pump stations
We'll just,
to gain a little bit more, but there is a finite point, I think, that you can get to. You can tweak it a little bit, but there's going to be a finite point where the pipes just can't accommodate additional peak flow.
thank you.
So it says pipe, not necessarily the permit amount. In other words, you can't you can't go back and seek a permit.
That's
for more.
correct. We're not gonna put in pipes that, far exceed, the capacity of 500,000 gallons that we're permitting.
Okay,
So, we're putting in pipes that can accommodate a bit more than that, but we're not oversizing pumps. We're gonna be careful about, low flow conditions early on, and when we get to higher flow, at that point, we look at, some pump replacements, and by that point, probably need to do some pump replacements. And so we can gain perhaps a little bit more, capacity to move more than 500,000 gallons per day. We'd have to go back to GLSD to sort of modify our permits if we're gonna be beyond that a little bit. So there's a little bit of expansion there, but not doubling.
okay. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I believe the pipes, what was it, 650, 700,000 is the capacity that we're talking about under the current design? Well, we're permitted
Force main,
to the force main, okay, which is, well, is above the 500,000 permit that we have. So we have the capacity within the system as it's being designed to accommodate beyond our permitted limits. So that if the need arises that we need to modify the permits, we go back and we do that. So we're not undersizing the system and building it directly to correlate with the permit. We're building a system that can slightly accommodate above the capacity of the permit right now.
I think I just misunderstood the presentation, so that's why, that's
So
why.
I do have one other question. In the event, God forbid, everyone this side of the Mississippi wants to build on 28, and you're very soon over capacity of the system, do you have to then seek out a new contractor and permitting with whichever town you end up going through in order to get permission to put more of our fine stuff in the Merrimack?
If you're talking about our connection in our permit with GLSD,
Yes.
yes.
Thank you.
Mr. De Niro?
Yeah, I've asked this question before, and I don't quite understand it. What is the long-term plan to get every resident of North Reading on the sewer system? Is there, I understand that we haven't gone there yet, but there must be some kind of a thing like, why would other residents pay $1,616 a year, but, knowing that there's no capacity for them to ever come on? I mean, is there any goalposts that would allow that to happen?
No, I think when you've asked this question in each of the informational sessions, it's pretty well been answered that there is no plan. And the reason why each and every resident would contribute towards it is because the system as a whole, in terms of the growth that it's expected to generate, would benefit the town as a whole. So I know there's talk about Martin's Pond, we talk about the potential for Martin's Pond, but the design did not involve that. The design was really specific to the particular corridors that we've been talking about in all the informational sessions. There's no secret meetings and secret plans to put sewer throughout the town. We just simply wouldn't be able to afford that, and we're just really zoned in on this design and these corridors because they're basically the business and industrial corridors. So there isn't a plan, because what was approved by the town was to design this plan just for these routes right now.
Thank you for explaining that, because I had no idea what the long-term plan was.
Yeah, that would be really nice if that could be done, but that's not what we're focused in on. So I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that, or if that answered that question.
I think that answered that pretty clearly.
Okay. Do you have any more slides you want to? I'm sorry. Do my colleagues have any more questions? Do you have? And then.
I don't know. I'll ask questions, but only when I know you're done.
Okay.
I think I am. I think the next slide is just that combined slide.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Parisi. Just hang in there, because we might be picking your brain a little bit more about this.
Sure.
All right. kind of shows the combination of all those
This
three
is everything, that's correct.
Yeah.
that we just reviewed.
And we can
Mr.
zoom in.
Wallner, do you have a question?
Yeah, so two questions. One is, so as people hook up, first of all, thanks for the escalation, which I've been asking for. So we found a way to do that, so that's a very creative way of doing it. I appreciate you doing that, and that makes a lot of sense. And I understand at 30 years, that's the set price, and you can't go any higher, so I understand that. What happens with that money when we do that? We've already engaged on the bond, we've already set up all our fixed costs. What happens with the money when people start to connect?
So we'll have operational costs that need to be budgeted for. And I think like the water enterprise, those system development fees are, I believe they're reserved or they're within the sewer enterprise fund and can be used for operational costs. So in order to fund, you know, the operations and have some reasonable way to lessen the rate to the users, especially at the beginning years, I believe those revenues should be reserved for that purpose.
So then, let's say we get beyond the initial years, what happens when we're in year 20 or 30, and people are,
Or 12.
or 12,
Yeah.
you know, or 10, you know, like, what happens with those fees? I agree that there's a startup cost, you have to offset that, because you're not gonna have enough
Yeah.
users to offset all the expenses. But what happens in the long run with the money that's extra?
Again, I think it, you know, would be attributable towards, you know, operations. If you have more than what you need, then I guess other decisions can be made with that.
The reason why I bring it up is because we're asking the entire town to pay for this, right? So if the only thing that benefits the people who is actually connected to the system, that isn't giving a return back to the entire town.
That is true.
So I, you know, personally, I'd like to think about that a little bit harder, and just like, how could we return that back to the entire town so that there's a benefit? You know,
Wait a
like-
second, because I think we're confusing two different things. Mr.
Well,
O'Leary, are we confusing two different things?
I don't-
No,
Because there'll be a sewer rate paid for the
Right, that's
cost of
different.
the
That's
program,
different.
That's different.
cost of maintaining the system.
That's different.
Right. This is to offset the overall, I thought the whole purpose of this was to offset the overall,
What I'm saying is
Project
you know,
cost.
At the beginning, we're anticipating nobody's gonna connect. So we're asking the town to fund the entire amount.
right,
At each household, right?
right.
So then, when people start to connect, you're not gonna change your loan, you're not gonna pay off your loan early, I would assume. So what happens with that money? I understand as a startup, you're gonna need, I don't understand what.
Mr. O'Leary's
Okay, go
gonna
ahead. Answer
answer
the
that.
question,
no,
please.
no, I think there's obviously going to be startup costs, and in the earlier years, there's gonna have to be subsidies in order to maintain the sewer district department. You know, because the cash flow from the users is not necessarily going to support the operational costs. So you can have different sources of income, whether it be some of the Pulte money to be used to do that, or some other additional revenues that are raised through any new growth to do that, or these connection fees to do that. But you know, it's more of a policy decision on the part of the boards who are sitting here as to what's going to happen with that. I would envision that these funds that are going to be collected, these specific funds that are going to be collected, are going to help offset the debt service on the project. In the earlier years, we may have to use it in order to subsidize the operational costs, but at some point, we're going to be at a break-even point on the operational costs, and I believe also some of the fees associated with the operational costs will also have to support some of the debt service. So these fees, I would envision, would be to offset the costs of the debt service on the whole bond.
That's
As
how
you
we
said-
talked about
As you
it.
said, as a return on investment to the community as a whole who's putting the money up. These are additional revenue. Again, it's not a lot of revenue if you really think about it in the whole scheme of
No.
things. But still, I think it's incumbent upon this board to set a policy, and budgetarily wise, to ensure that the revenues that are collected for the connection fee help offset the debt service. Understanding that the early years may require some additional subsidies, and this would be a source of revenue to do that, until the cash flow supports the operation of the system
So
itself.
how would that look to the end user? So would the 1,116 get reduced?
No, the 1,116 is going to stay the same. What it does is it frees up additional costs for other operational expenses, keeping in mind, the whole idea of the sewer system, not the whole idea, is, the environmental concerns that need to be addressed, the ability for us to expand and new growth and build some additional revenue so that we can support the current level of services that we enjoy, as well as expanding those services and enhancing them along the way. And the only way that we can do that is to attract new taxpayers to the town. The only way you're going to get that is through new growth.
I
So,
understand that. Yeah.
The return on investment for everybody in the community as a whole can be significant, but it's also going to be determined by the town as a whole, through town meeting, through zoning changes, through what the uses of the properties are going to, what are going to be allowed. Town meeting is going to decide those things. How much growth and where do you want to have it and what do you want it to look like? This provides the town with the opportunity to go after the revenues and new growth, help pay for this system. Again, you can count on the $1,116, a year for 30 years. The question is, what else can we support in maintaining the level of services? Because without this, we're locked in. And when we start talking about the budget, we can talk about what are we facing over the next 3 to 5 years.
Anyways, it went off. I
No,
understand
it's
the
a
whole
good
growth
question.
thing.
No, it's a good question as far as what happens to the money that we collect.
Right.
And it should be primarily to offset debt service. But in the earlier years, don't be surprised if it's used to offset
I just don't know
operational
how that
costs.
gets affected. I don't know how that
Thanks,
gets,
Phil.
how that looks over the long run. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how that gets returned back to the town. So maybe you can think about that more. And the other thing is, are we gonna ever require people, let's say they put a new development in, at that point, we're gonna say, okay, you tore down a house, you're gonna put in some new housing development, are we gonna say at that point you have to hook up, there's no septic option, or are we gonna allow them to do what they wanna do? And are there any other kind of requirements where you're forced to hook up?
Madam Chair.
Wasn't it always opt-in?
Madam Chair, through you, it is, opt-in, although, we've talked about those scenarios where there may be Board of Health involvement, and they have expressed that if there's a total failure, that they could envision a scenario where a property is required to connect rather than to replace a system. And the second is that there are scenarios under the Community Planning Commission's subdivision regulations where a new development being constructed may be required to connect if sewer is nearby. But those are new construction. They're not existing
Makes
properties.
sense, yes.
And Madam Chair, through you, a third response to the earlier comments. I think the point Mr. Parisi is trying to make, and I think Ms. Galvin's trying to make as well, is that the intent is to recover operational costs through rates, right? That there would be a rate assessed to sewer users to cover those costs. But I think the caution that we want to put out there is, in the early years, those rates they may not be tolerable. They may need to be too high to incentivize people to connect. And I think that's why Mr. Parisi is saying you may have a period of time where the rates would need to be so high that they couldn't cover the cost. And perhaps these revenues might be able to offset that to make it more affordable. So I think
That's
did I address that?
clear to me. Yeah, again, it's what happens after you hit
So-
break
so
even,
can-
you're cruising down the highway.
Right, you can set up a special purpose stabilization
You can,
fund.
I'm sorry, say that again?
You can set up a special purpose stabilization fund that you define what goes in, this is not less than 25%. So the fees can automatically go in, you can do up to 25 to 100% of those fees, they can automatically go in there. And then at the time that you set that up, you also define the spending purposes. So you can say it's for debt service, and you can say it's for operating or to stabilize the rates. So down the road, if you wanted to offset your debt, even though, you're not gonna change or pay off your bond, you can reduce the debt on your recap sheet by transferring in from that fund.
Okay.
So you have
All right.
that opportunity
Rather than
down the
through the
road if you
tax
really
rate.
wanted
Yeah,
to.
okay, that's fine. Okay, I just want to know what happened in the long run. Okay,
And
thank you for
Mrs.
explaining.
Galvin, in that stabilization fund, does that money carry over year after year? Let's say there's, okay. All
The
right,
interest stays with it.
okay. Mr. Gilberto, anything else you
Nope,
want?
that was all. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, that's clear, I think. Does that
Thank
make
you.
sense?
Yep, no, good.
Any other questions?
No, thank you.
Okay, questions? Thoughts?
So then we gotta, are you asking us now to kind of look at which, I mean, we're running out of time to do
Per
this.
bedroom.
So per bedroom, right? I mean, that's what we're,
Madam Chair, through
Bedroom equivalency.
that's what we're looking at next, is where do we want to be, right?
Madam Chair, through you, we put this together in the hopes that it provides a menu to select from, that at some point soon or very soon, we can present in information sessions as a concrete scenario for, we know what the debt exclusion will be, that is fixed at this point. It's really more about what a scenario for connection fees might be for properties when they choose to connect down the road.
So I do want to poll my colleagues, just to ask, when we were looking at the options and we eliminated betterment, and then we were looking at the options of no fees, you know, for no opt-in connection fee, I guess we could say, or this scenario where there's a range, are we still, you know, having seen these figures, we're still considering that option of these connect-in fees, right? Is that fair to say, Mr. Wallner,
Yeah,
Mr. O'Leary?
I think connecting fees, I think the system.
System development.
System
System
development,
development,
user,
what's the
it's
third
like a
one?
user fee is what it is. Mrs. Gonzalez? Yes? Mr. Studo?
Yes.
Yeah. And Mr. O'Leary, is that the thinking being, that's the option, I think, that we would be leaning towards, I
I
guess.
think it's important for the entire community to recognize that for those properties that are along the route, there should be an additional cost above and beyond the carrying cost, because their properties are being enhanced and their ability to develop it and to maintain it is going to be significantly enhanced, as opposed to someone on my side of town who's never going to tie in, and I have to replace my septic system, you know, at $45,000 a year. So while there's no free ride, I think it's important that there be a connection fee, or whatever it's called.
System development fee.
Yeah.
System development fee, you know, for anybody that's going to tie in. And again, I wasn't present at the meeting where the majority of the board that was here, you know, decided to take the betterments off the table, take the privilege fee off the table. I think that was a wise choice. And again, it kind of removes, it addresses the concerns that were raised by everybody across the community as far as the impact on those properties that are going to be directly impacted by this. So that addressed that, and I think it was a wise decision. But by the same token, I've been hearing from everybody across the community too, that it's important that those that are going to be able to utilize the system pay something additional to tie in, because no one is going to be kicking in to replace my septic system up on 15 Mead Road. You know, when that fails, it's all on me. When their system fails here, if we give them an opt-in proposal here, you know, if you can repair your system, it appears as though the Board of Health will be saying, okay, you can repair the system, but if there's a certain system needs to be replaced, you've got to tie in. And there's a cost associated with that, and that you're going to be tying into an infrastructure that the entire community is paying for, you have to kick in addition to that. So I think what I've been hearing across the community is there was concern about the numbers that were being thrown around as far as betterments, but there was also a realization that everybody that's going to be taking advantage of this system and tying into it should be paying some sort of a tie-in fee. So I think that's where we should land.
Yeah, okay, a user connection fee is kind of a standard thing, so.
Right, and again, so it's up to us to determine, you know, what's fair based upon the bedroom equivalency formula, because that's the standard that's used across the industry and measurements. And again, it's nothing new. Where restaurant usage is reduced to bedroom equivalency. So if you're going to use a restaurant as an example. So it's just a question of landing on what do we think is a reasonable fee. And if you think an average home is a 3-bedroom home, what do you think it should cost someone to tie in for this, and set the bar. And again, we can set the bar at a certain level based upon what's been presented to us, and then offer discounts and incentives for people to tie in sooner rather than later. again, the money that's gonna be raised from this in the whole scheme of things is not overly significant. But what's important is to ensure that the opportunity for people to tie in on an opt-in basis is provided to them, and they're incentivized to do so, because it benefits everybody. It benefits the specific property owner, it benefits the town when it comes to the ability to develop that parcel of land or redevelop that parcel of land. And from an environmental standpoint, obviously, it takes the effluent out of the ground here and gives us additional capacity to do other things from a revenue enhancement standpoint and economic development. So,
Well, I'm not quite yet, I haven't really absorbed all this yet, but I would say, I can just throw this out there for purposes of dialogue. If we're talking about a 30-year period of time, I could see the range, like Mr. Wallner had originally mentioned, of, years 1 through 5 at the 5%, years 5 through 10 at the, 6 through 10 at the 10%. The next 5 years, 15%, the next 20, although, that would be the range. I think the outer limit, I think, is pretty exorbitant, even if we're talking about 30 years down the line, And I do like the qualification that we got, that if, let's say, like you said, in year 12, there's a little, downturn, and it's there would be encouragement of people to tie in, perhaps, then, there's some leeway, just not to go to the outer limit. There's some leeway to offer incentive then, anytime. I mean, that's just my thought on it. So that might be too much of a range from years 1 through 30, but I don't know. Mrs. Gonzalez.
So I might have misunderstood. I thought we were being asked to choose one of these percentages.
We're gonna be.
but this is,
But what you're saying is, or are you just,
No, I mean,
are you just adding a
you
different?
could just say,
Are
yeah,
you
5%,
saying
that's it, we're done. For the life of the
Yeah.
life of the loan of the project for 30 years, anybody that connects in, no matter what year it is, that's the percentage. We can fix it at that. We can do a range.
Or do a range?
We could say, we're gonna start at,
Okay.
you're gonna pay the 20% and go from 20% to 50%. You can pick a higher range to begin with.
Okay.
That,
So
I mean-
just
So no,
Go ahead.
Just a correction on that. So you have to establish a fee that's going to be in yellow at the bottom of the column. So if you're looking at the top box, if you will, so that fee, if you're in the 5% range, is $1,621. It won't slide to the right. It'll only go down to the blue box, and you can start at, a discounted 6.7, and then max out to the 1,621. You can't,
oh, I
once
see.
you
okay.
set,
That's
you
what I
can't
thought.
slide to the right,
That's how I
right,
was
no,
understanding
it's
it.
so,
Okay.
So it goes,
down,
right.
yeah,
Right,
down the column, yeah.
right, yeah.
yeah.
Across.
Vertically versus
But it doesn't,
horizontal.
Correct.
I like the horizontal one.
And you were
yeah.
confused. I'm like, all right.
I get it now, okay.
So this is a very useful guide for the
All
board to
right.
determine,
Oh,
but if you land on a figure by saying, I want $5,000 a bedroom equivalency,
Yeah.
say it's $15,000 tie-in fee
yes, yeah.
for,
Yeah.
you can put it anywhere on the chart you want. And if you want to forecast, say, okay, what's the value of that 30 years from now? What's the present value today
Oh, I see,
versus,
okay.
you say, okay, I'm going to go to column 40% here. Really, I don't care the 40%, 45. It's like, I'm thinking, I want $60,000 to be a maximum, or $50,000 to be a max. But then I can say in years 1 through 5, it's $5,000 a bedroom. And 5 through 10, it's $10,000 a bedroom. Or $12,000 a bedroom, whatever it's going to be, up to the maximum amount that you set that happens to fall somewhere, either in the 40%
Oh,
or
I see,
50%
okay.
range.
Yeah.
So the discounts
that
that you
correct?
offer, discounts that you offer, you don't have to follow this here. I can offer a discount less than, I can set it up here at $16,000 bedroom and say in years 1 through 5, it's $4,000.
Yeah, you can set the maximum,
Right.
and that maximum is usually set with a uniform formula. So the cost of the project that you want to recoup divided by the total number of bedrooms.
Right.
so that when we go to assess a particular property, we're gonna look at the number of bedrooms and apply that price per bedroom.
But then the
Right.
discount that the board sets
Yep.
is then applied. So I can back into a year's
Yeah,
one
you
through
can-
five.
you
I
can
can
s-
back into a 4,000, when
Right.
I set a $16,000 fee, I can
Yep.
back into a $4,000 fee in years 1 through 5.
Right. So what we did to set this up is, okay, we said, what's a reasonable starting point, you know, and it was arbitrary a little bit, you know, but once we had the starting point, then we wanted to make it sort of increase evenly throughout the remaining period. So we just divided by the number of periods that we have there, you know. So we have incrementally crept it up equally till we maxed it out. You can lower your starting point, you can raise your starting point.
Yeah. How much every 5 years, how much percent does it go up? Do you know?
It's discretionary.
Well, no, I'm just asking, what is it currently?
What is it current? So I forget how we ended up doing that, but I think we may have originally had it starting half of that, and so we doubled the starting point. So it was like, actually it was 232, I think I remember, something like that.
That's correct.
So-
Okay,
So we can play with.
You can play with a
all this.
667.
Because right now you're doing it by absolute dollars.
Yeah, yeah.
But you could always say,
yeah.
you know, it's going up by 10%,
Right.
then
So,
9%.
yeah, you're locked in at the bottom, you have discretion as
So
to
we
what
can
you want to
change
do
that.
going up.
okay, I see. So I'm gonna change what I said, and I think we should stick with the 5% column, period. That's what I think. Anyone else?
Just wondering why 5% versus anything else?
Because we can back
Because
into
it's the
5%
lowest amount?
if we go higher, right? Is that what you were
But,
saying,
but
Mr.
if you're saying, if you go with the 5% column, what is that, $1,600 or something? What is it?
Yeah,
Yeah, the 16, so you multiply that for a
Per
three-bedroom
bedroom.
house, you know, that's, 45, just under $5,000 for a three-bedroom house. And that's the most you can ever charge.
right.
Perfect. Yes, I understand. Great.
Okay,
Okay.
Yep, that's a user connection fee. Perfect.
I would ask a different question.
Mr.
For the
Wallner.
metric. In my mind, we're looking to have housing development will probably be the primary growth engine going on here. So if they were to build it using their own septic or using their own package treatment plant, or however it was, how much is that per bedroom versus, that to me is like, that's the benchmark we're aiming for. Because if you're gonna charge them the same amount as it costs them to put in a package treatment plant, that
Yes.
doesn't make any sense. We're supposed to be giving them some sort of a discount from that number. Let's say it costs, I don't know how much, I'm just making up a number. Let's say it costs $20,000 per unit for them to have sewage hooked up to it. If we offered at $10,000, that would incentivize them and encourage them to come develop the property.
And plus, they can develop more,
Plus, they could develop more.
because they don't have to have a septic system or a leaching field or.
Right. So my question is if we're gonna try to attract developers to come in, which largely we believe is gonna be housing, what would it cost them to put in their own unit versus where do we line up here? We want to incentivize them to join us. We want to incentivize them to come to our town because we have this opportunity. You know, that's to me is like where we would set, that's how we would set those numbers.
Do we have I think we could have, let's see, Edgewood did its own plan,
Yeah.
Pulte did, right? Did Pulte do it for its own home? Pulte did it for some of the buildings? Do we have an idea of what the cost of that was?
Madam Chair, through you, so the number of bedroom units for Pulte,
774.
it was a $3 million package treatment plant, that's what they've told us.
Yeah, $3 to
Over
$4
the
million.
years. So that'll give you a number to start with. I think that we,
No.
Make us get our calculators out.
no, I
Where's
think
that
Joe's doing it first right now.
3,875.
How much?
3,875 per bedroom.
I think on the other end, Madam Chair, through you, just by way of information, and I can pull up the slide Mr. Studo had asked for, but I think it was about $35,000 to $45,000 for a three-bedroom home septic system, about $15,000 a bedroom. So that's the other end of the scale. And I can see Mr. Studo has his hand up, actually.
Okay, Mr. Studo?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that there still is as well, I mean, the interest of fairness. I mean, I think 5 for illustrative purpose, I mean, I think that's low. And again, I keep going back to striking a balance with, as we all agree, making sure that no one gets, voluntary or not, it's too expensive. So I definitely think that any reasonable option, because again, there needs to be an incentive, has to be, significantly, and by significant, I mean a good amount lower than what it would cost to replace a septic system,
Yes.
right? But at the same time, I mean, I think that, can we put that up again, please? I'm sorry, I was referencing it. Being remote doesn't work,
Oh,
but I didn't want to get any.
is that your computer?
Yeah, I'm just seeing hold on, either way, but that, I think that, 15 or 20% on that column, I think gets us closer to, again, that, we hear, we've done everything we can take into account what some on the route did, and I agree, we all changed our mind, that's why we wanted all the feedback, but at the same time, I think they, at 1,625, if I'm correct, thank you. I mean, at 1,625 per bedroom, right? The worst case scenario for somebody with a 4-bedroom house is,
5 grand.
sorry, my brain shut off, so I gotta now use a calculator after 8 o'clock.
$6,500.
$6,500 versus, again, I even am under the understanding, and I am not an expert, but from people that develop that 4-bedroom septics are a whole other, thing as well, from a standpoint of leaching field and everything. So I'm just saying that, again, that's what we need to balance. And my opinion is that if, let's say, you even had a 3-bedroom house, I mean, even at, let's say the 15%, 15 plus decommissioning, which we do have to factor in, I want to be clear, plus tie-in, again, do we get to a number that is not only, a good amount less than replacement of a septic system, but more importantly then puts you on the path of, whatever, and we can argue, I mean, that's gonna come to a presentation, whatever value your home increases that, again, this is something where, like many projects, the first generation of homeowners, for lack of a better way, may not get the biggest bang for their buck, right? But that's all I'm saying. I think the 5% is too, I mean, I can tell you this, if we choose the 5%, I hope everybody on that route is rushing to say yes.
Right.
I'll pick the 5%.
That is
I told you what I thought.
that is more than a gift. To the point where, sell me your house and I'll vote yes for you. Because that 5% is, I mean, that would mean a 3-bedroom house, again, I mean, we're looking at like $5,000 roughly to tie into sewer, decommission. I don't care what, I don't care how much concrete I gotta undo and pour, again. So again, I just wanted to say that we want to make it fair for everybody, right? And I applaud most of the abutters because they did say that, like early on, like we're not looking for a free ride. We're just not looking to go, to get slammed with something we can't afford, right? And I just feel like that 5% is a swing entirely in the other direction where it's like, I mean, I pose a different question. At 5%, who wouldn't tie in? I mean, it's just, and again, this is assuming that not everybody has a 3-bedroom home or a condo. So I just wanted to say that to me, I think that 15, 20%, maybe something in the middle, but that's where I would say is something where you can make a reasonable, although, even though 15 is still good, I could justify it for me, and just explain to the community that I felt like, it's something where, it's an incentive for something that long-term will benefit the entire town. I think that would be more, easily explained, then, you know, we kind of just gave everybody a really big Christmas gift.
Okay.
So,
$5,000 is a lot of money, Mr. Studo, though. So would I, that,
But if they had to replace their septic system today.
but
it's-
it would, that's not the point of this. The point of this is connect to the sewer system. Or go ahead and
No,
replace it.
But Chair Manipelli, the
You
point
choose.
though is that, I mean, I'm not saying that 5,000 is not, you know, like we're gonna go burn 50 hundreds in the street. But I'm saying, if I come to you and say it's 5,000 or low end 30, and you pick the 30, then, all right, that's what I'm saying. Everything's relative. We can't just look at that 5,000 in a vacuum. It's relative to what the alternative to that 5,000, if that's what went through, you would choose. And in those eyes, it would be a score.
Okay, okay, Mr. Wallner.
Yeah, okay, so, okay, so we just heard Pulte was, let's call it $4,000, because that was 5 years ago, right? So let's just call it $4,000 for one bedroom. A single-family home is gonna pay $12,000 per bedroom if you wanna use the repair, replacement, $36,000. So, but we don't, I'm not saying we don't care about the homeowner, but the homeowner is not our issue. The only thing we care about is new growth and development. That's what we care about. The homeowner is going to benefit from whatever we set for the rate, because the homeowner would have to pay $12,000, but the developer might pay $4,000. So they're going to benefit. So it's not about the single-family homes. It's about new development, and that's what we care about. So what we're trying to do is attract people in here who find our sewage rates to be attractive, so we'll develop in our town. The winners will be the single-family homes on that route. They're automatically going to get a discount based on the developers. So if Pulte's at 4,000, then basically, we're in the 20 to 30% range to get them to, and let's ask the people who have been asking about development properties, who we've had people who have asked us already, like, what's this looking like? Does this fit their math? Because then they don't have to spend that money on a package treatment plant that they have to maintain, or septic systems they have to maintain. What they're looking for is easy access. They want to have it said and done, and they want to go. And that to them, if you said it's 4,000 to the town, or it's 4,000 to package treatment, I'm going 4,000 to town every time. Why wouldn't I? Because I don't have the maintenance. I don't have any more maintenance issues. So to me, it's all about new growth, Pulte-type properties on Main Street, on that line, that should be driving that number. And that's the only consideration we really should have, to keep it simple. And so if you said that, then we're probably right in here. That's about where we are right there, somewhere between 20 and 30%.
I also want to consider,
Mrs. Gonzalez.
I also want to consider other things like restaurants and things we used to have, bowling alleys and movie theaters and, that shouldn't be, that should be brought into this too.
Let's find out that number. If we know that, let's figure that number out as well.
I think
Mr.
I think this
O'Leary.
has been very useful and important for the board to see, and now we have to start thinking about conceptually, really, what are we looking to address here? We're looking to address new growth. We have current businesses here, we have current homeowners here, and I believe that whatever the board decides is going to be cost-effective for current residents and current business owners and commercial property owners. To Rich's point, we're looking to incentivize people to come and invest in North Reading. We're looking to allow town meeting to make a determination as to how our town is going to grow and what type of businesses and how much housing do we want to have, and how are we going to meet our mandates, being an MBTA community and everything else that we need to address. How are we going to address accessory dwelling unit developments now, which we'll be considering down the road, and people are going to be able to tie in and put an accessory dwelling unit for an in-law or something like that there. So if you look at a 750 unit development, so you say like a Pulte, what's that, 744 bedrooms there?
774.
That's 744. Let's say 750 units. They spent between $3 and $4 million for their package treatment plant. If we back into a number and say, okay, we want them to have a buy-in fee of $2 million, that comes down to $2,666 a unit at 750 units. And then, is that unreasonable? Is it reasonable? That's what we have to determine as to what kind of developments are we gonna be attracting here? And do these numbers make sense? To have people come in and develop, to increase our tax base, to help share the burden of what we currently enjoy. So is $2,600 a bedroom reasonable, or 2,500, or 3,000? I mean, that's what we have to land on, looking at the new development, not just the current. You know, but what are we looking to achieve here? And if we can arrive at a number, then we can look at the chart. But I think we have to understand, to Leanne's point, you know, how does it affect a restaurant, you know? And again, we have the numbers when it comes down to the equivalency, bedroom equivalency, based upon the number of seats that they're licensed for, gives them a flow, a water flow, water use flow, which converts to per bedroom count. And say, does that make sense?
Right, that
And
needs to
then,
be in
so as we get
practice.
you know, the housing and the retail stuff balanced out,
Yeah,
then we can arrive at what the dollar figure should be. And what's really going to promote economic development here, so that the town can take a measured approach and know exactly what the impact's going to be. Again, the money that's going to be raised from this is not going to have a significant impact on offsetting costs. What it is it's going to help us pay for initially some maybe the operational costs, but again, some of the debt service on it going forward over the 30-year time period. But really what we're trying to do is stimulate some economic development and get some different usage and capacity to do greater things along this route, as well as meeting the environmental concerns that we all have to be concerned with too. But the single-family homeowner who's out there on Concord Street, and I think, you know, some of the people that have been here for 55 years, you know, who are retired and on a fixed income, and, you know, when we said $45,000, you know, we almost caused an early demise to them. We need to be concerned about them. But it's not going to be the driving factor here, because whatever we decide is going to be substantially less should they decide to sell their home now or have to upgrade their system and tie into the sewer system. It's going to be cheaper than replacing their septic system, significantly less. But what we have to do is this balancing act of trying to decide how we're going to promote economic development and new growth.
and let's point out that they don't have to tie in unless
And they don't have
want to. or-
Correct,
or
and they
need
don't
to.
have to tie in. If the
Yes.
system can be repaired, it can be repaired. If it has to be replaced, maybe a different story.
Right.
But again, if they're gonna sell it, Title V, I mean, how many backhoes do you see around town every time they're selling a home, right? Systems need to be replaced, particularly if, you know, the old little ranches and capes around town. So I think this is vitally important information, but I think now we have to concentrate on what becomes a reasonable figure to help promote economic development and makes North Reading a viable community to invest in going forward. And to meet the plans of the community planning commissions, long-range plans, and the master plans, and everything else, it all dovetails together. It also dovetails into our budgetary process. We need some additional help through additional new growth to help support and maintain what we have, not to grow our programming, but to maintain it. So, again, so this is something for us to, you know, I think at our next meeting, we should be prepared to land on a number that works. And so when we look at the different scenarios and the different types of development that can take place here, that the numbers make sense. Because in some instances, you know, if you're looking at a $20,000, you know, if you're looking at well, if you take the 750 and multiply it times $5,000 a bedroom, you know, that doesn't make much sense, because they can build a package treatment plant for less. You know? So that's what we have to be considering. We want to incentivize people to do it. We want them to develop here. We want to welcome them there. We want to control the type of growth that's going to take place, and get a return for the investment that the community as a whole is going to be making. But the return isn't just going to be this connection fee. You know, the return is really going to be the new growth that takes place to help share the cost of operating our community. I guess I'm done.
That's why I think that the 5% makes the most sense, because it encourages that new growth. You're not de-incentivizing someone to come in here based on what I'm looking at here. I can,
And I think, but I think the only thing we need to consider is what you've heard and I've heard from those people that are not gonna be able to take advantage of this is that, no one's subsidizing my replacement of my septic system or new development. I can't develop my property at all. It needs to be somewhat fair,
Yeah.
and,
I-
it's subjective, so you have to
Very
hit the balance.
subjective.
Very
Well,
subjective.
To me, it's not subjective, because you can measure it. We
Right.
already know Pulte. Let's do the restaurants, those are
No,
solid
and
numbers.
Greenbrier just spent $2 million to upgrade their current system, and I forget how many units Greenbrier has. You can do the math there just to upgrade a current existing system.
And I don't want to de-incentivize anybody, but on the other hand, I don't want to leave money on the table either. Like, we're making this huge investment. I mean, we should make it more attractive than other communities for them to develop in our community, but I don't want to just give it away, because the whole town is investing. So, I mean, there's real numbers we can determine this on, and we'd have a better discussion, going forward. It's definitely not going to be 50%.
No,
It's definitely not going to be up there. Again, it's somewhere in that,
yeah.
to me, it's like
I'm
the 20,
looking
25.
15, I'm looking 15.
Yeah. Well, let's let the numbers do the talking, because that's really what we're talking about.
I mean 15%.
Okay. We're gonna, so we'll take a look at the data. I know it said votes may be taken, but I think it's a lot for us to kind
It
of
is, it's a
consider.
Need more
Between,
information.
we need more information, we'll get that additional, that additional information, and then we'll mull it over, I guess. But at least we have a more clearer picture
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
the numbers and.
It's a good workaround.
Thank you,
Amazing.
and thank you for,
And again, it's important for the community to know that no betterments, no
No
privilege
privilege
fees,
fees.
no mandatory tie-in.
Right,
So you can remove those discussion points and arguments, and once we land on some numbers here, that's what the proposal's gonna be, and then we can really focus on what's the benefit to the community and why is it a good idea. That's all.
all right. Thank you so much for your thanks. I think we're,
Well done, Joe.
yeah,
Thank
good
you.
job, thank you.
thank you.
Joe and team.
Gonna stay for the town meeting.
Oh, we got-
All righty.
Good discussion.
Mr. Gilberto, we ready to move on?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Special town meeting,
Thank you, Madam Chair.
wastewater project, vote to call, special town meeting and sign warrant?
That's correct. We do have a draft of a warrant that we have put in the meeting packet for a special town meeting, potentially on May 15th. That is an evening that we have reserved the gymnasium at both gymnasiums at the middle high school. The draft of the warrant before you includes both approval of an appropriation for the project, as well as the authorization to borrow for the project, to seek SRF funding for the project. And then also, well, it's not clear that any town meeting authorization is required to make explicit your ability to recover through a system development fee, additional fees to offset future costs related to the project or after the completion of the project. The final thing I'll note is the article was drafted to be contingent on a Proposition 2.5 debt exclusion vote, which would need to occur within 90 days of a vote to appropriate the funding at a town meeting. We also would need to notify the town clerk at least 35 days before the date of such an election so that arrangements can be made for ballots to be printed and for absentee voting to occur before as well. I know there are different feelings about the timing based on where we are at right now. We have an information session scheduled for Wednesday evening related to the project, but obviously the date is coming quickly. I've spoken with the schools and we believe that there may be alternative dates available in the later part of the month of June if we were to decide that the May 15th date was not doable based on where we stand today. Those dates, I believe, and I would come back at a future meeting to ask for that date to be executed if we were not going to go forward with the May 15th meeting. So I'll stop there. I think I've said
Mr.
everything
Studo has his hand
I
up.
have to
Yeah.
say.
Mr. Studo?
Yeah, so I had a little bit of a feeling that this would happen tonight just because of the new data, but even before that, I think that, there's no, I think May 15th just is not gonna work. I feel that, we are under still that, we really gotta have everything wrapped up by June 30th, 2 votes, one way or the other, it seems. But I feel that, this is something where, for better or for worse, for yes or no, I think that both the board and the community deserve like whatever time we can spare within the guideline to get, and again, we haven't decided, meaning that if we meet, when's our next board meeting? Next week, 2 weeks? The 24th? Okay. If we meet on the 24th, even if we could call that a drop dead on choosing one of those that we just saw, again, I mean, it's gonna take a few meetings to get at least everybody, again, whether yes or no, but at least to have as much information as possible out there where people understand most of it going into town meeting. And I just think that with the I'm just looking here, yeah, with the May 15 date, I mean, that just wouldn't give us enough time. Because again, I mean, it's something where, from the select board all the way down to every single resident in North Reading, I mean, it's not like we can drop everything and just focus on sewer 8 hours a day for the next 3 weeks. So, my suggestion is that there's whatever preliminary dates we may be able to use in June. Hopefully, if right after school ends, but before anybody disappears for vacation. I think that's something that, I mean, I don't want to say we don't have a choice, but I'm just saying that I don't think May 15th is workable. Thank you.
Okay. Mrs. Gonzalez?
I won't be in the country on the 15th, so
I didn't hear, yeah.
I won't be able to attend on the 15th. I'll be out of the country. So I wouldn't be able to.
You don't allow Zoom voting in.
They do not. Mr. Wallner?
So, how fast after we have the meeting do you have to have the second vote? How fast was that?
Within 90 days.
How many?
Within 90 days.
90 days, okay, so I agree with Mr. Suda that we should put this after our regular budgetary town meeting before the summer breaks, so that way come back in September, people can do their vote. Because I think that we should, at the budgetary meeting, we should take time to present to the people who are at town meeting our definitive plan for people who are at town meeting, who care and who do show up, so they know exactly what we're talking about, and they have 2 weeks or 3 weeks, whatever that time frame is, to come back and vote. Because I have people still talking to me about betterment. Like, they've got this in their head, and we haven't gotten the story out clear. And even tonight, it's not clear it's not entirely clear in this board what we're doing, and we're up against the thing. So I think that, do our normal town meeting, June 2nd, whatever the date is, and then 2 or 3 weeks later, we do this special town meeting specifically for this purpose, and we go all out to make it as clear as possible, including using the budgetary town meeting to explain what's going on, not to get a vote, but just do informational, because we do town reports all the time. And I think that makes sense. And then come September, then people have gone away for the summer, we've got the vote, and then September, we still have time to get everybody back together again and to do the second vote. So July, August, September, we will get into September. That's my opinion.
Madam Chair, just to clarify, annual town meeting is June 12th.
June 12th, better yet.
Thank you.
So we could do it 2 weeks later.
Also,
June 12th,
I don't know that we can just decide that's when we're going to do it, based on all of the school activities that are going on in the month of June either. So I would think we would be able to, you know, we would need to be able to check on the availability of the school for that. Right, and I don't necessarily agree with you that we don't even know what we're doing here. I think we've each and every meeting, we've gotten giant leaps forward to shaping up what plan we would be expecting to propose at a special town meeting. So I don't know that I would agree with the characterization of that. And I also do think we definitively took betterments off the table. We definitively knew after the input from DOR, removing the betterments and the assessments, we had to go to a different model. So we definitively acted when we heard from folks that came to the informational meeting. So I don't know necessarily that I would characterize it as we're not even sure. I think we're considering now what was, as of today, presented to us for consideration. And I think that's why when I asked my colleagues where you were at, we know that we're going to propose a plan that incorporates a user fee to tie into the system. So I do think we've made modifications as we've moved along based on the feedback that we're hearing, based on the advice that we're receiving, based on all the information that we're getting. And that's what we're supposed to be doing as a select board representing the community. So, but I don't know that we can just say, we're gonna do this, and then we're gonna have it 2 weeks later, because we have to talk to Dr. Daly and Mr. LaPrette and figure out what's going on there.
That's
You
fine.
know, there's proms, there's people's schedules, there's graduations, there's final ceremonies, there's a whole heck of a lot of things people go to in the months of June, not the least of which is our annual town meeting. So there's a lot that goes on in the month of June. So I think we should be, maybe, Mr. Gilbert, I don't know if you want to weigh in on that. I don't know how long it took you to lock in June 12th, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't one phone call.
Madam Chair, through you, the June 12th date, as this board knows, was recommended because of all of the activities happening the week of June 5th. I asked about another date in May, and there are no other Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday evenings available. It's only the May 15th. My understanding is that the next dates available are after June 19th. So looking at June 20th, 21st, 22nd, in that range. Those are not confirmed, but that appears to be what we would be looking at for a timeline. And then possibly into the next week of June as well.
You're also gonna run into October town meeting at some point, and the preparation necessary for that.
Oh, Mr. Studo.
Mike, wasn't, just a clarification, but my understanding is that the 90 days would apply to a route where Mass DOT is not involved, because with them, we have a June 30th. We have to give them a yes, and both of those votes would have to go through, correct?
No,
Madam
Are
Chair,
you
through
sure about that, Mr. O'Leary?
I'm positive, no, that's,
Okay.
no.
Because
No.
I think we were accelerating the pace to.
No, we were actually given a reprieve on the pace because Mass DOT's timeline has slipped a bit. They're not going out to bid until December of '24?
September.
September of '24. You know, so we have plenty of time as far as to meet DOT's deadlines. I mean, the only other consideration that we have to think about is the SRF funding and the funding, when the availability of that funding is. I personally believe that, you know, we're gonna be okay as far as the rounds go. You're gonna miss this round, but we don't need the money in this round anyway, but based upon where we were, or where we are in the listing, it would appear as though we're not gonna fall off the list and lose the availability of those funds for the next round of funding for 2024, 2025, which is when you would need it. So, I wouldn't be overly concerned about the Mass DOT timeline and meeting that. I believe, and again, even with an affirmative vote in June, that's fine. Then we just have to wait for the override vote. But that would be a strong indication. And again, we're at the point where, planning-wise, we're pretty much ready to go with Mass DOT. We're ahead of schedule. So I wouldn't be overly concerned about it. But just if I might comment on this, I think the May 15th date is too quick. I think the board has to nail down exactly what is it we're proposing and what these fees are going to be, so that people know the expectations are out there and what the actual proposal is. So if we make that decision at our next meeting, then we can say, this is our plan, and now we have to go out and sell it. And we can concentrate then on the actual plan that's going to be proposed at town meeting, as opposed to what we've been doing since last fall, which is, looking for the input, listening to people, modifying our proposals based on the feedback that we got, and now we've landed on something, and then people can render an opinion on exactly what's being proposed. To this point, it's been, this is what we're thinking about doing, this is what we propose for you to consider, and you've given us the feedback. Now we've heard it. So now, once we have our plan developed and finalized, we can then concentrate on informing the public as to the rationale and the real reason why it's being proposed. What the impact is going to be on the additional homeowners and the actual homeowners that have been along the way. That's all going to be laid out in the plan that we have.
Okay, but I think
So I
for
don't think we have enough
purposes
to-
of our agenda item,
So I agree.
we're
the end
not
of June.
signing a warrant to have a special town meeting, for sure, in May. For sure, we're not signing that warrant this evening. We're definitely not having a special town meeting in May. I think, right?
Yeah.
Right. So
That's still going to have an election, though.
we don't know when we're gonna call the next, because we have to arrange that with the school department, right, Mr. Gilbert? Or did you have a vote in there that you wanted us to take?
No, I still have work to do to confirm a date, an
All
exact
right.
date.
So is it fair to say that we should just pass over this agenda item? Because we're really, we're not having it in May. If we're having one in June, if we're gonna move that quickly in June, then we need to decide what day it is before we vote on it. And then backing into that, we would have a certain amount of time for a warrant informational hearing in advance of that special town meeting like we've been doing, right? We're still planning on doing that process.
Correct.
And obviously rolling out informational meetings once we firmly determine this is what we want to do and
Exactly.
why we want to do it
Exactly.
and why it makes sense to do it that way. All right. So are you comfortable if we pass over the agenda item and move on to the town election warrant? Because that one I think we know is locked in. So,
Yes.
all right? Is that all right with everybody?
Yes, Madam Chair.
All right. So let's move on to the next order of business, which is to sign the town election warrant for May 2nd.
Madam Chair, through you, I'll just note before the motion is offered,
Mhm.
you probably observed and have seen there is no housing authority seat on the warrant. And that is because of the conversion of the seat that was expiring to become the state-required tenant representative seat, which I believe we're expecting soon a recommendation from the housing authority for potential appointment to that seat. But you'll see that there is no housing authority seat on that warrant.
Okay. So do we have a motion?
Do we?
There should be a motion to sign the warrant for
For
the
the town
election.
election.
It should be right after the one on the town meeting.
I'm just fine. So I'm not doing this one special, I'm not doing that one. So right here. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Okay, yeah. Okay, so Madam Chair, I move to sign the May 2nd, 2023 regular town election.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Wallner, second by Mr. O'Leary. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Studo.
Aye.
Mr. O'Leary.
Aye.
Mr. Wallner.
Aye?
Mrs. Gonzalez. Aye. Manu Pelley is aye. So we're all going to sign that this evening?
Yep. Send that around.
All right.
Mr. Labby's going to witness this.
Next order of business.
We have to sign it so the constable can
Oh,
witness us.
okay, I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were saying that.
Yep.
Okay, signing on there.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Next order of business.
Excuse me.
I believe we're gonna pass over.
I believe we're gonna pass over that.
And we have to.
We're gonna get some more information.
Here goes.
Yeah, we do need to sign the warrant, yes.
Okay,
Is it not being signed?
before we move forward, it's gotta be
Here goes,
done.
Steve.
Did we have another vote on that? We just had the
It
one
just
vote.
needs to be signed, it just needs to be
Yes,
signed.
Right. So the next order of business is to review and discuss the updates to the fiscal year 2024 revenue and expense plan.
Madam Chair, that's correct. And through you, I'm going to share my screen here with a document prepared by the acting finance director.
Thank you.
And I'll wait just a moment while folks are.
He said he said I should. And I'll just put it in there. Unless he has to say, should we change it? Just one? No. Yes. It says 2 copies. Can't see it through my glasses.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Gilberto.
I think I skipped ahead.
Did
First, we
you?
had the revenue plan and then the departmental budget recommendation. So I'm going to take them in that order, but the first one is very brief.
Okay.
And this is an update to the revenue and expense plan that was reviewed a couple of meetings ago. And I will just point folks to the line for investment income. And what you have before you is a recommendation based on a series of projections done by the acting finance director and by the town treasurer concerning the significant amount of investment income we're seeing due to the increased interest rates over the past year or so. In the past, we've had a lot of conversation about this related to the Pulte revenue and investment of Pulte. We're actually going to set aside the Pulte because in the scenario you just saw a few moments ago, we were actually projecting to begin to use that or use it in its entirety. So we haven't factored that into this investment income projection at all. What we have factored is a number of other accounts that the town has invested, both stabilization funds, but also for general fund interest where the interest rates are going really well. And where we landed with some consultation with the financial planning team was to use a projection for fiscal year 2024 of $250,000 in investment income, and then to step it down $50,000 for fiscal year 2025 to about $200,000. That's from a projection that we were using of about $50,000 as of the last revenue plan. And I just will go to a different document that I believe I put in here that should speak to what we're seeing in the projections. Maybe it's not in there. So what's driving that change is we've looked at the trend, which has been increasing in monthly investment revenue to the point where our projection, including the Pulte revenue, is upwards of $700,000, I believe, for the fiscal year. So we've been very conservative in what we're projecting and for that revenue stream here. And I think that the financial planning team was also, I think, comfortable. I think it was sort of right in the middle of where folks wanted to be. I think some folks wanted to see that number higher, and others felt it should be more conservative because we know that the interest rates will eventually come down, and our ability to access that revenue will decrease. And I don't know what's going on with the document here, so I'm going to stop that because it's really distracting. So the bottom line is that we have made that update to the revenue plan, provided a number to the school department to work off on their budget, and it is the number that we'll be working off of for the municipal budget in the discussion on the next agenda item.
Any questions? All right, I think you can move along to
Thank
the
you,
next one.
Madam Chair. I'm sorry about that. So this is a document that reflects the updated revenue numbers. So I'll just start from the top. It's been prepared by the acting finance director, and it's a similar format to, I think, what we've seen in the past in previous budget years. Fiscal year 2024 municipal budget. So looking at the 2023 budget, you see $19.223 million with about $350,000 as one-time items that were funded. The available revenue for this upcoming fiscal year 2024, $19,311,555. We're recommending an increase in what is a direct offset for the municipal budget in the amount of $50,000 to reflect both the trend and actual expenses associated with the operation of the ambulance. So that brings our total municipal revenue available to $19,361,555. Our total municipal departmental requests exceeded that to the tune of nearly $2 million. $21,346,863. This has been an issue that we have seen over the past few fiscal years, where departments are asked to identify needs and to project forward how we're going to respond to those needs in their budget requests. And each year, I have sat here with a budget deficit that we've been dealing with. And each year, we've managed to solve it by doing things that we're not necessarily overly excited about, but are comfortable enough with to try to continue to provide services that we know that the community has expected, across the board, both for the municipal government and for the school department. And that continues to be the case here. We're able to do some things to make gains, but there are a number of things that we were not able to fund here, looking at this based on what we're looking at. And I'm not here this evening looking for the board to take a vote, but I am looking to provide a scenario to try to balance the budget for the upcoming fiscal year. So if we take that number, $21,346,863, we know that there was a request made for 4 new firefighter positions, and that would be in addition to the 4 firefighter positions that would be freed up by going to the regional 911 currently on the desk, being available to go out. Certainly was my hope to be able to make some progress against those 4 positions as soon as this upcoming fiscal year, perhaps to do 1 or 2 of them. It's just not something that we're able to do financially at this point in time. And as much as it disappoints me to say that, I know that that is the reality of where we stand today with our financial projections. I will say, and it's going to be listed below, the request for the day officer, or it's been called fire prevention as well, officer, that the chief has made for, I believe, 4 years going back. We are recommending to fund for this upcoming fiscal year. So that would be 1 new position that would be funded in the fire department. We are looking at the call academy. This is a potential area for reduction where there has not been a lot of call firefighter activity. I will say, though, that was in anticipation of looking at the staffing moving forward. So that's something that we're looking at as a potential reduction. Code enforcement, there is funding for a part-time seasonal building inspector. There was $20,000 in there. We would look to reduce that because it's not been utilized this past fiscal year, but still to leave some funding in there should we identify some resources to help us with that. The DPW, there was a request, at the request of the board, to fund the Martin's Pond and the maintenance. There was, I believe it was $15,000 that was requested. We recommended carrying a smaller amount, in the amount of $5,000, still in the annual budget, knowing that there are previous year warrant articles that are available that we can draw from. The experience has told us that for Martin's Pond, we often see a big number that we need to draw from, and we also don't necessarily need the money in any one given year. So I think the acting finance director and I felt that a warrant article might be the avenue to make that funding available to the Martin's Pond community over multiple fiscal years, and we have some of that in place at this point, but we still want to show and make some sort of small investment. So we've left that at $5,000.
Excuse me, what's left, what's available in the warrant articles that were already appropriated?
It's about 17,000.
So another scenario we've looked at is fuel, and we saw a spike like everybody else did, and then it sort of leveled off, and we believe that because we've left that a healthy budget, there's an area to try to reduce that in order to balance to the tune of about $25,000. The Council on Aging additional van driver, I know that there was a lot of concern about that request. While I feel that it would be advantageous for us to try to look to do something in that area, the fact remains that, you know, this is a significant add in terms of another person to be driving, and we are looking at outside funding sources, whether they come from the state or the funding through a warrant article, to try to pilot a solution that might not involve town personnel. So that's why I don't have it recommended in this scenario.
You said for October? A warrant
No,
article?
that's a warrant article for June.
It will be for June.
It'd be for June, yes. Parks and Recreation, and I had this conversation with the Parks Director going to before the budget process. I understand the concern, I understand the need that the department has identified. This is the first year that request is made. I think it's all on our radar as something that the Parks and Recreation Committee feels it needs. I don't think we're in a position to fund it at this point in time based upon the pressures on the budget. For youth services, both the reduction in professional services and the tuition, I've recommended we reduce both of those. I think that that's something we can look at with the new youth services director once that person is on board. And if we need to make an adjustment at a future point in time, perhaps even as soon as October, then we could do that. I don't think that we are in a situation to be able to fund it at this stage. And then the final piece is identifying things that are municipal one-time costs that we will be able to fund as one-time expense items. And I'm going to go through a detailed listing, but it totals $1,037,245, which is a large number, mostly being driven by the rapid turnover we've seen in the fire department. That's what's driving that number. And I'll go through it. We have a smaller item for finance department filing system. Some one-time costs in the salary pool that in previous years the Department of Revenue has allowed us to carry over from one year to the next. They've notified us that that will no longer be their approval, so we need to fund it separately. Municipal building maintenance, you heard from the DPW that they have some projects they'd like to take on there that are one-time in nature, so we've recommended trying to fund those separately. DPW small capital, I think you're familiar with smaller equipment that generally is funded, you know, depending upon a project need and a specific need, so they've aggregated up to $54,000. And the elder services small capital request of $4,731. So those are, you know, significant but not overwhelmingly large items. It's when we get to the fire department staffing that we see the more significant cost. You know, 7 replacements for recruit training and for additional hours. Those are for both current and projected vacancies. You may recall we funded just about $300,000 in that in this current fiscal year, using free cash last June. The hiring process has been slow for a number of reasons, and it's now just picking up, so we haven't spent that money, but it won't be available to us in fiscal year 2024, so we're recommending funding it from free cash as a bridge to cover the costs as we go through the replacement. Again, not for new positions, we're talking about the existing staffing level. Recruit training coverage for 1 new firefighter and additional hours, so that's related to the day officer position. That's why it's broken out separately. Again, that's an expense we'll see associated with adding a position in the fire department, and we're looking to fund it in that fashion. Paramedic training, coverage, and tuition, we're trying to make a projection based upon what our expenses might be. I think we're hopeful that based upon the use of an incentive, we won't have to incur any costs to do so, but we feel that we need to try to come up with a funding plan moving forward that allows us to cover those costs in real time as they come up and as the chief determines he needs to schedule training should it be required. And then finally, the direct expenses for equipment for the replacement and new hire firefighters are the last two lines that are there, totaling $1,037,245.
We're talking about a third of the fire department turning over.
That's correct at that number, yeah, it'd be 21 is the number. So, a unique situation where I think we went 4 years without any turnover, if my memory serves, and then we hit this sort of bubble where a number were hired at the same time. Hopefully 30-odd years from now, we'll be in the same situation when folks are, they've had a long, successful career and are retiring. But that's the nature of the bubble that's working its through that we're in right now. I don't want to be overly dramatic, but I think for the public, when we are in these meetings, we resolve things and we get to town meeting and everyone sort of feels like, okay, the budget's balanced again. This is the underside of what it takes to balance the budget for us from one year to the next. Any one of these things not occurring, would have a noticeable impact. The best practice is not for me to be here looking to fund them as one-time items, but that's what's required based upon the revenue stream that we have here. And the pressure will only get stronger as new growth slows, particularly the new growth with Pulte, who have told us that the rate at which they've been building those housing units is going to slow, if it has not already. So, I don't sit here and lightly offer these solutions or describe the situation for the board or for the public who might be tuning in at home. But this is what it takes to try to balance the budget. And there's not really anything huge in what I just described here. Most of it is just doing what we're doing year in and year out. We're just taking advantage of and responding to an urgent situation with a number of the expenses. So I'm going to stop, Madam Chair. Not here this evening looking for a vote, but trying to show a scenario where we might be able to resolve the budget. I don't know that it would look exactly like this when we come to a vote for a budget, but it probably would look something like this. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Ms. Gilberto, questions for Mr. Gilberto to my colleagues? No? It's not easy. The budget is not for the faint of heart, that's
And
for sure.
what's the school department, what are
Ms.
they,
Troller?
what situation is the school department in?
Oh, yeah.
You
Madam
were the
Chair,
financial planning team,
Yeah.
I'm just,
Madam Chair, through you, I recall that they were looking at about $800,000. They had about $400,000-ish in one-time expenses. And again, I don't want to tell their story, but that last 400 is very difficult for them with real impact that they're working. I know that they've been working through it, and I think I have the right numbers generally from my conversations with the superintendent, but it's not, it's a significant challenge.
Vincenzo's got his hand up.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Studo.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, Mr. Goldberg, I don't think, I know you don't take lightly, what you said, but I think it needs to be expressed even more. Because, again, I think that, and I've said it in multiple meetings, that I feel a lot of the time, and I was one of them before I was on the select board, the public gets blindsided with something, not bad word, more caught off guard when there's a new expense or there's a level service that we need to increase. And then it becomes, well, where all our taxes go, right? Because I was one of them as well. And so I think that doing this and explaining that there's just a lot of short-term Band-Aids to a much deeper wound, I think, needs to be, I don't think you can stress it enough. And some are gonna take it as, well, officials are just trying to look for more money because for X, Y, and Z, but no, we're talking about now just the stuff we have to fund, not the extras, not the, even certain improvements like field improvements. I mean, these are just like the borderline. So I just want to say that I don't think we do it enough, and I hope between us, and I know that the school committee feels the same way, we need to do a better job, and Mr. Warner also referenced it, but we need to do a better job, not just here, but at town meeting, that what went into making this sausage of a balanced budget, wasn't easy, and that sausage might keep getting thinner every year. And there's only one way to get it back fat, and we know how. No one wants to say it out loud. So I just feel that, again, it's something where, I just want to say, Mr. Gilberto, that if you ever feel the need to get up and stand on the table to explain to people that we're going to run out of money, and we already have, and we're just plugging the hole with one-offs, feel free to do so. I'll be fine with that. Thank you.
We'll get up on the table with you.
Not really Mr. Gilberto's style.
No, but Madam Chair,
I wouldn't trust these tables.
But it's definitely, we're definitely feeling the strain of it, I guess, trying to figure out how we're gonna make it balance. And we really don't spend a lot of time talking about that during our meetings. We're just trying to figure it out. And we know the finance team is probably losing sleep over it too. So that's unfortunately been the routine for these past several years that I've been on the board. So there's always some kind of Band-Aid approach that makes its way available to us, and we're certainly fortunate for that, and fortunate that some of the funds are invested to be able to bring us some revenue to be able to use things like that. But it's not easy. And, Mr. Studo is right, or whoever said it, when we finally do get to town meeting, all of that hard work has been done by the TA and the finance director, and all of that stuff has been looked at by the financial planning team to figure it out, and the school department has been able to, and the school superintendent and the business manager have been able to figure it out somehow and come back and work together to be able to make it balanced. But it's not without a lot of hours and hours and hours of effort to be able to get it there. So this is a problematic one, though. This one's a problematic one. So I appreciate you going back there and trying to identify these areas. As tough as it is, we want to make these, we want to make these additions to staffing that we know we need, but as tough as it is, we can't afford it, and that's just the bottom line. And that's what the school department is experiencing too. Just for level services that they have to provide, they're being asked, to make cuts to what they need for level services. That's not an easy spot to be in. So I appreciate the exercise that you took here.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
So we don't need a vote, but we can move on, and we should probably let Mrs. Galvin go home and
Thank you, Lorianne.
hopefully reach a point where we can let you go home too, Mr. Gilberto. All right. Are we ready to move on to the vote on the extended outdoor dining? Outdoor dining?
Number 10, yes.
No? Yes?
That's correct, yes. And there is a motion that's been prepared, Madam Chair. This is a pandemic-related extension. I'm not aware that anyone is going to pursue it at this point in time, but we want to continue to make it available to folks.
Some of them made fantastic outdoor seating. What was it?
Yeah.
Horseshoe.
All the horseshoe had a
Yeah,
big
beautiful
tent, yeah.
outdoor seating.
Bye, Tim.
Good night.
Oh, somebody's jacket, is that your jacket, sir?
Oh, yes, thank you.
There you go.
All right, so do we have a motion?
Yep, Madam Chair, I move to extend previously approved permits for temporary outdoor dining to April 1st, 2024, subject to requests being made by the permit holders and approval by regulatory departments.
Second?
Motion by Mr. Wallner, second by Mr. O'Leary. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Studo.
Aye.
Mr. O'Leary.
Aye.
Mr. Wallner.
Aye.
Mrs. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Manu Pelley is aye. We're going to pass over, because we need more information, so we're going to pass over number 11. We're going to probably have that information by the next meeting. to be able to devote on the useful life of capital items. So we're getting some more info on that. Now we're public comment. Does anyone wish to speak in public comment?
They all
All right,
left.
hearing none. Number 13, legal bills.
Yep. Madam Chair, I move to approve legal bills for March in the amount of $21,871.50 as follows. General, $16,989. Labor, $4,882.50. 20 Elm Street is zero, for a total of $21,871.50.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Wallner, second by Mr. O'Leary. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Studo.
Aye.
Mr. O'Leary.
Aye.
Mr. Wallner.
Aye.
Mrs. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Mrs. Manu Pelley says aye. Votes aye.
We have another one too, right? Yeah, so second one, legal bill. Madam Chair, I move to approve legal bill for American Arbitration Association in the amount of $325.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Wallner, second by Mr. O'Leary. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Studo.
Aye.
Mr. O'Leary.
Aye.
Mr. Wallner.
Aye.
Mrs. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Manu Pelley is aye.
Go on to minutes next.
Minutes.
Madam Chair, I move to approve the regular session minutes as written for the following date, March 6, 2023.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Wallner, second by Mr. O'Leary. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Studo.
Aye.
Mr. O'Leary.
Aye.
Mr. Wallner.
Aye.
Mrs. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Manu Pelley is aye.
Madam Chair, I move to approve the regular session minutes as written for the following date, March 27, 2023.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Wallner, second by Mr. O'Leary. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Studo.
Aye.
Mr. O'Leary.
Aye.
Mr. Wallner.
Aye.
Mrs. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Next, that's it for minutes.
That's it for minutes.
Next order of business is the acknowledgement of release of portions of the following Select Board Executive Session minutes, subject to any necessary redactions under the Public Records Law. 12/14/2018, Section 6, 217 Main Street. 12/17/2018, Section 3 DPW. 11/5/18, Section 3 Litigation. Acknowledgement of review and continued non-disclosure of portions of the following Select Board Executive Session minutes. 12/3/2018, Section 3 Fire Union. 12/3/2018, Section 2 Non-Union. 12/17/2018, Section 2 Non-Union. 12/3/2018, Section 3 NRAS. 11/19/18, Section 5 and 7, investigate criminal misconduct or consider filing of criminal complaints. 11/19/18, Section 3 Fire Union. 11/5/18, Section 2 Non-Union. 11/5/18, Section 3 NRAS. 11/5/18, Section 3 Health Insurance. 11/5/18, Section 5 and 7, investigate criminal misconduct or consider filing of criminal complaints. 10/15/18, Section 3 Health Insurance. 10/15/18, Section 5 and 7, investigate criminal misconduct or consider filing of criminal complaints. 10/18, Section 2 Non-Union. 10/18, Section 3 Health Insurance. 10/18, Section 3 SSBC. 10/18, Section 5 and 7, investigate criminal misconduct or consider filing of criminal complaints under the open meeting law. Acknowledgement of release of portions of the following Select Board Executive Session minutes. 12/3/2018, Section 6, 217 Main Street. 12/17/2018, Section 3 NRAS. 11/29/2018, Section 6, 217 Main Street. 12/17/2018, Section 6, 217 Main Street. 12/11/2018, Section 6, 217 Main Street. 12/3/2018, Section 6, 4 Cogswell Road. 11/19/18, Section 6 Real Property. 11/7/18, Section 6, 217 Main Street. 11/5/18, Section 3, Section 6 Real Property. Next order of business is the Town Administrator's Report. Mr. Gilberto.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me just scroll ahead here. First, I executed with an agreement with Norse Environmental Services of Tingsboro to conduct wetland flagging on the so-called affordable housing overlay properties, as requested by the board and founded at town meeting, I believe, in October of last year. So those properties will be flagged in the coming weeks, and we'll get some more information about, where the developable areas on those town-owned parcels are located. I again submitted the town center wastewater project, which would connect the municipal buildings in the town center to the middle high school wastewater treatment plant, to Senator Markey and Senator Warren for potential congressionally directed funding. I would like to recognize CIPC Chair Don Kelleher, who also contacted Senator Markey to advocate for the application. The town's applied for housing choice designation through the State Department of Housing and Community Development. It's a program that rewards municipalities that are producing new housing and have adopted best practices to promote sustainable housing development. It's reflective of things that we've already done, including zoning that we already have in place and housing developments that have already occurred. Allows us to take advantage of potential state funding. I think as everyone has seen, it was in the newspaper, there's significant construction and renovation upcoming at many of our parks, and we are the beneficiary not only of town meeting's approval of funding, but also of help from our state delegation, Representative Jones and Senator Bruce Tarr, for a significant amount of money going into our public parks. The Ipswich River Park playground area will be closing in the next few days and be closed for a chunk of time for replacement of the playground. Closed from April 12th through April 28th. Playground structures will be removed and replaced with ADA compliant structures. For Arthur J. Kenny Field, the turf field complex will be closed during the removal and replacement of the turf field, scheduled to take place mid-June through early August. That's the goal. So right after the spring sports seasons have ended, it will close. The walking track will also be closed for those who I know access it just because of the ongoing construction. So I know that will be a bit disruptive to some of the regular users of the facility, but it is necessary in order to properly and safely complete the replacement. And finally, there is a significant renovation to Kid Spot, perhaps the oldest play structure in town, upcoming, and it will be closed for perhaps a more extended period because of some site work that's required in order to maintain ADA access, or to provide ADA access on the slope that's there. So we ask folks to be aware and understanding when we do get more information about that. And that concludes my comments for this evening. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Good. Any questions? Good, all set. Board member reports and old and new business. Mr. Studo.
None, I'm good, thank you.
Mr. O'Leary.
Just a couple of things. One is I know the athletic subcommittee associated with the school department have been discussions with Mr. Carucci in relation to, how around town we have these signs acknowledging some achievements of our sports teams and things of that nature. I know they're talking about actually moving them from the structures that are there because we haven't been maintaining them over the years as far as having timely recognition for teams. I think they're talking about putting something on school department property, so the board members should just be aware that something may be coming up in relation to that, and I think we should be supportive of their efforts. Other than that, I know board members have gotten an invitation for April 23rd, where Kitties is going to be celebrating their 80th anniversary in town, and all the board members are invited to come and encouraged to come. I just think it would be appropriate if the board acknowledge their 80 years. I mean, we don't have too many businesses in town. I mean, the Horseshoe's been here a little bit longer, but 80 years in business. They employ over 100 people, been multi-generations, and they've been good members, business members of the community. Most of them have lived in our community, and I just think it would be appropriate if we acknowledge that with a proclamation of declaring April 23rd as Kitties Days and allowing the chair to sign such a proclamation. So if the board is supportive of that idea, I think it would be appropriate.
Sounds like a good idea.
And again, Kitties has been, anybody you go around town and say, where are you from? North Reading. Oh, Kitties. Oh, Kitties.
Absolutely.
Kitties. So it's, it's a landmark in our community for a reason, because they've been a family-run organization in business for all these years, and they have a trademark. They put us on the map and continue to be a good reflection on the community and good community members. So I hope to be there too, just to help them celebrate, and hope everybody else can make it too. And if the chair can sign a proclamation, that'd be great. So if the board's in favor of, I would move that we proclaim April 23rd, 2023 as Kitties Day in North Reading.
I love it.
Hmm?
I love it.
Shall we?
So I made a motion.
Sure.
Madam Chair?
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Motion.
Reverse.
Motion. Second, Mr. Studo.
Aye.
Mr. O'Leary.
Aye.
Mr. Wallner.
Aye?
Mrs. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Manu Pelley is aye. Is that all right, Mr. Gilberto?
We'll make sure the message gets conveyed to the proprietors.
No,
Yeah.
no, again, if you could
We have to have you
look
sign.
up a proclamation of the chair
Prepare,
and sign it.
yes.
Okay.
Kitty's Day.
That's good.
That's it, Madam Chair, thank you.
Mr. Wallner?
I'll just add to that, I learned that you can bring a guest to it, so you can bring a guest, so if you bring a spouse or whoever, you're welcome to do so. That's it, that's all I have.
That's nice.
Oh, and come over to Martin's Pond when your park is closed, come over to Martin's Pond and enjoy our park
Ah.
over there, which is in good shape, so,
That's a good idea.
yeah, so don't, feel free to use that. And maybe next year we can get some funds to break that, it'd be nice to upgrade that park as well, which was built on fundraising we had done over decades,
Yep.
you know, so that's how we came about that.
How long's it been? 'Cause it seemed, I remember when that happened.
How long has it
They redid
been?
that.
Clark Park?
Yeah, when they redid it.
We've
My kids
done
were
it, I
young.
worked like twice, three
Yeah,
times.
it's been a
over.
while,
Yeah.
it's been a long time.
Yeah, pretty much since I moved here, with environment 91.
Yeah,
And about 5-6 years later, we did our first round, and then,
yeah.
you know, a lot since then, so, yeah. Anyways, come to Martin's Pond.
That's a good place to bring the kids. The pirate ship, it was the pirate ship, and that was a lot of fun for them.
A lot of fun.
An adventure for them.
Yeah.
Mrs. Gonzalez?
I'm all set.
All right, I have a couple of things. So one of the things that's come up in the financial planning team meetings, we've talked about the use of the ARPA funds and really not really a clear direction or a plan, and a request made to use some of the POLTE funds for, or the ARPA funds for devotion to some of the capital improvements projects. So what I think might emanate from that committee is some, right now we're working on budget items, but what might emanate is a little bit of thought put into, you know, where those funds could best be spent, and perhaps some recommendation coming out of that committee to the select board. We've never,
Who's on the committee, Madam Chair?
Dawn Kelleher, I mean, you're gonna have to help me out.
Abby, myself,
Hurlbut,
you,
Dr. Daly, Michael Connolly.
Mr. Conley, not Dr. Daly, just Mr. Conley.
Okay, Mr. Connolly, sorry.
Jeff is the school committee representative.
Yes, Scott Buckley attends, right?
Occasionally, yes.
Um,
We do not have a vacancy in the finance director role, but the acting finance director does participate,
Mr. Studo and I,
and Mr. Fode.
and Mr., no, you're mixing up CIPC. I'm
Oh.
mixing up CIPC, I'm sorry.
I know I'm mixing them up.
No,
think.
I am. I'm talking about
You
CIPC,
both are.
folks. I'm so sorry. You're right. All right, I'm mixing them up too. Actually, Don Kelleher sat in for someone, and I didn't even realize he wasn't on. That's fine. I'm sorry. CIPC. Sorry about this. Yes, so there's Dawn and Abby, Vincenzo and I, Scott and Jeff.
Jeff. not
Yes,
Scott.
Yeah.
Scott and Jeff.
And Michael Conley, not
Yes,
Scott.
And
Yeah.
Michael Connolly, right? So it's just a thought that there was consideration or discussion about, can we be accessing those funds to be able to pay for some or portions of those projects? But my understanding from the select board talks that we've had has been that that's just a set aside for purposes of the sewer project. So there was a difference of opinion on that. But I think at some point that CIPC will, you know, be considering maybe looking at that and making some recommendation on it. Maybe not this year, but the following year. They had wanted to get some money for this year's projects, but there wasn't really it didn't really incorporate into the plan, but I did tell the committee that I would raise it to this board for purposes of discussion, potential recommendation. Mr. Gilberto.
If I could add to that, Madam Chair, you know, my intention, based upon the collective feedback I've received on the ARPA funding, and I am admittedly probably part of the delay in utilizing it for another purpose because of the concern over financing the wastewater project, but as we sit here this evening, my intention was to work with Mr. Keller to utilize basically a third of the $4.5 million toward the fiscal year 2024 capital budget, to plan to utilize another third against the fiscal year 2025 capital budget. And in the third year, which would be the final year, we can utilize the funding to either have it available for capital projects or as needed for any revenue shortfall that we might see in the operating budget. That's sort of what I've been thinking. It's one person's opinion, but I think you'll see something that reflects that in the first year as a proposal, particularly given the extent of the cost on a couple of the capital projects that exceed $1 million. So,
Mr. O'Leary. See,
I
you
know-
guys thought we were gonna be done,
No,
but
I
I
know,
think
but
it's
there-
an
there-
important piece for
There's
us.
no way that any of these ARPA funds should be used to balance the budget, in my estimation. I don't think that's necessarily intended. Do we have a clear understanding as to what they can be used for?
the description we've gotten is we have wide latitude for the utilization. And I seem to be the only person talking about the year 3 use to plug a potential hole in the budget. So
No,
I'm clearly
that
getting
is a-
outranked and outvoted.
That is a possible,
It is.
acceptable use of those funds.
I don't find it to be an acceptable.
No, no,
use of
I
it. Yeah, I
mean-
know, to
Under the
me,
law,
you know,
yes.
it's one, maybe under the law. I mean, these are one-time monies. They should not be used to sustain ongoing operations, in my estimation, because then that makes it just more unsustainable and you know, postponing the inevitable maybe, but you're not facing reality. So to me, these funds should be utilized to, you know, things that we wouldn't normally be able to budget for or take care of, or if there's some community-wide projects or something that we would like to undertake but just wouldn't have the funding for it. You know, those types of things are going to have a long-lasting impact on the community that can be enjoyed for generations to come. Not to plug the holes and not to replace a fire truck or a, you know, or capital. You know, if you're going to replace a bridge, maybe. But you know, other than that, I don't. And I know we have a couple of bridges that are
That is on.
that are problematic. But
There's two, there's a culvert and a bridge
just
that
to
are
let-
public
you know,
safety.
Without knowing specifically what you're looking at, I think I'm going to be a hard sell.
But some of that is gonna come before this board and in terms of a recommended plan. So you should just know that.
I appreciate the heads up that it's coming. I just hope that we are forewarned well in advance so that I can opine beforehand.
Yes, for sure. Mrs. Gonzalez. Oh,
Is there a time limit that we have to spend that?
Yes, so it needs to be spent by fiscal year 2026. So that's the 3-year window.
We have 3 years.
Yeah. And Madam Chair, through you to Mr. O'Leary, it will be the Park Street Bridge. That's most likely where you'll see at least $1.2 million recommended. It's a significant capital
Oh,
project
yes, yes.
that, you know, is
I'm
a,
aware of the bridge.
yeah, not a, I would say, sort of a, I won't say once in a generation, but we don't see projects like that very often. And I think if you look at the spirit of the ARPA funding, it may not be transformational, but it's critical, and it would really wreak havoc in our ability to do other capital projects if we had to take that on.
Again, you heard a caveat on my part as far as
Yeah.
unless we're replacing some bridges.
Yeah.
Yes, so I'm aware of that bridge.
And it also gets, we have the ability to combine it with about $500,000 of state funding for that bridge too.
I'm
So,
gonna just ask you that.
yeah. Sorry.
There's a culvert too that is on our list, and that's another public safety.
Yes.
I don't know how low it is, because this year I gave a lot of zeros that I have to reassess. That was my marching orders, without being ordered to do so, because I wanted the roadway improvement projects on the top tier. And Mr. Keller had to go back and, you know, rearrange that and put that back on the schedule for completion. So those Central and Park, Central and North, Chestnut and Haverhill, those dangerous places, that those got put back on there, so.
Thank you for fighting
Those,
for that.
those are kind of 5 public safety projects, but there's other ones too that were really important, but we're lacking the funds to be able to do all of them, so. The other thing I wanted to mention, yeah, the financial plan team, they're just in the regular meetings, just trying to figure out the, you know, the budget stuff, so. And the most important thing I have to mention, the most fantastic thing, is that the Maskers won the state championship for their one-act play, Beautiful Burnout, the Massachusetts Educational Theater Guild. It was absolutely fantastic, amazing, all around. Every single person they would, and I am a groupie officially, so I saw them at each time they presented at Weymouth, and they got awards for everything from the acting to the tech crew to the sound to the design. It was phenomenal. I mean, this is such an amazing group of kids, way beyond their years in terms of their acting talent and in terms of their technical talent, and they have a wonderful director, Mrs. Kane. It's quite a thing. Her proprietary blend of how she gets this group to just be just a family together, and it's amazing to see that. It's been amazing. So congratulations to them. They've been to states before, and they had to go through rounds to get there. So they were picked among 90 schools that were, there were 3 schools that ended up being the champions of it, and they were one of 3. And the other 2, their plays were exceptional too, just like Masker. So amazing job. We're on the map now. You can check that off because they've been there before, but they haven't won, and now they have won. So
Congratulations to them.
Yeah.
it's
Fantastic.
amazing.
That sign you're talking about.
That's right.
Yes,
Yeah.
well, that's what,
Yeah.
yes, because we
Yeah.
we do have all these kind of things up and trophies up for sports, and I think these arts, we have students that have won poetry contests, and there's that aspect of it that we should really put the case in there, because they did get an actual trophy, so that should be displayed, I think, so.
Yeah, agree.
Well,
But I'm
you know,
sure they're making a place
I
for
agree.
it.
I mean, the arts and I mean, how much this community has progressed over the last several years has been fantastic. And again, there's a direct correlation. Obviously, the instructors and the directors are key in the kids' commitment and all that, but, you know, we have provided them with a world-class facility here, and they're taking full advantage of it, and that's fantastic. That's exactly what we wanted to see, and it's great. It's terrific, and it should be acknowledged, and the public should be able to
Definitely.
drive by and see it too.
Yeah.
And you can't underscore that, and this came up throughout the competitions, that other communities, their arts programs were closed. They wouldn't keep it going. It was one of the things during COVID that went first. But here, you know, when kids couldn't play sports, they kept the arts programs going differently, you know, but they kept it going. And the other night, I went to their all-town chorus. It's massive. So they have the middle school, the high school, they have Notorious, and and I think they have the elementary there. And it's huge. So it just keeps growing and growing, and more kids want to participate in it. And it's fun, and they're each other's people, just like a sports team. They're each other's people, and they're supportive of each other. And the program is just phenomenal, from elementary all the way up to high school. It's fantastic. So anyway, I'm so proud of them, and I just think they're amazing. They're way beyond their years in terms of how they carry themselves, how they perform, how they their technical proficiency. It's amazing. I wish we could grab one of the people for our meetings, one of those kids for our meetings, sound and lighting kids for our meetings, but good job to Mrs. Kane,
How
good
about
job to
makeup?
the group,
I could
the
use a little
crew.
makeup.
Yeah. Makeup, yeah.
Well, you're gonna have this new lighting, and you're gonna look good.
Yeah, it was great,
You
excellent
need some
show.
work.
Yeah, don't we all?
We'll see some of these actors in lights, I'm sure, down the line, 'cause they're fantastic, so. And maybe some of the tech crew, we'll see them running the shows too, because they were all amazing, so. Anyway, so that was
That's
really
fantastic.
exciting and amazing to watch, and just so fun to see
So
them.
fun to sit there and watch it, yeah.
They got a police escort up the, it was
Oh,
fantastic.
nice.
They were hanging out the bus screaming, you know. They were being watched carefully. It was only out the top of the window, but it was so fun to watch them. They had a great time. So, that's all.
Congratulations.
It's fun
Yeah.
stuff. Fun stuff. And that's it. That's all I have to report. From budget to
So fun.
to
And on a
beautiful
good-
burnout.
And on a good note.
Yes. And that's it. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Yeah, Madam Chair, move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Wallner, second by Mr. O'Leary. Mr. Studo.
Aye.
Mr. O'Leary.
Aye.
Mr. Wallner.
Aye.
Mrs. Gonzalez.
Aye.
Manu Pelley is aye.